For as long as she could remember, Megan had always dreamed of warmth, care, and attention. All this she lacked from early childhood. Megan's mom died of a heart attack when she was about 5 years old. The duration of the ward was forbidden to give birth at all due to health conditions. Doctors warned of the risks, but the woman still decided. The first years of her life, Megan was the most beloved child in the world. She vaguely remembered those times of warm hugs, mom's tender words, and kind smile. But of course, no matter how hard Megan tried, she couldn't remember the details. Mom's face was lost in a blur. And then Megan was left alone with her father, a somber and uncommunicative man. He faithfully fulfilled his parental duties, fed his daughter, bought her clothes, even checked her homework, but any heart-to-heart talk was out of the question. Her father asked only specific questions about her grades at school, her health, her plans for vacations. Sometimes he wondered if anyone was hurting his daughter. Megan couldn't remember if Dad had always been so uncommunicative or if he had been so changed by the death of the woman he loved. Megan had heard from neighbors that her father loved her mother very much. He had long sought the favor of the modest beauty, and then, when Elena married him, fulfilled every wish of his wife. It was hard for Megan to imagine her perpetually dissatisfied father as romantic, loving, attentive. As she grew older, the girl understood. The father blames his daughter for the death of his spouse, accidentally overhearing his conversation with a neighbor. The men were standing in the stairwell, and Megan was just returning from school. The anniversary of her mother's passing was approaching. I guess that's why the neighbors, longtime friends, were having this conversation. I told her to get an abortion, Dad said quietly. But she wouldn't have it. Let it be, she said. She had a premonition that everything would end well. Megan, hearing these words, froze under the stairs. She just couldn't get up right now, thus giving away her presence. Well, it's all good in the end, and it was good at first. Uncle Peter, the neighbor, pointed out. Megan knew her mom was friends with his wife and Aunt Gray. Megan was born. Adeline still had a whole 5 years to live afterward. That's so sad, Dad agreed, but her health was failing, and I could see she was getting worse. And those sleepless nights, I myself tried to get up to my daughter to adult her to sleep, but I could not be there all the time. And those assholes, they finished her after 5 years. That's for sure. Even the doctor confirmed it. Megan was having a hard time processing what she had heard. She hadn't discussed it with anyone. And who would she tell? Her father, as it turned out, considered her the culprit of all his misfortunes, so he probably didn't talk to his daughter much. Megan didn't have any grandmothers, or rather she had one, her dad's mom, but she lived far away in the country. They saw each other very rarely, and of course, warm, trusting relations between them did not arise. And girlfriends. What about girlfriends? You can't talk to them about such topics. They won't understand. They're just fine. Each of them has a mom, a dad. Not all of them do, but Mom is the main mom. For so many tears, her childhood teenage years were spilled into a pillow. Longing for a mother the girl hardly knew or remembered. Sadness over the cool and strained relationship with her father. Megan dreamed of growing up sooner, having a family of her own, having children. She had no doubt that sooner or later a man would appear in her life who would love and protect her. And Megan would be happiness for him, a source of energy and inspiration. The father probably still loved his daughter in his own way. He rooted, loved, cared for his daughter as best he could, worried about her future. It was her father who arranged for the girl to go to the University of Economics and Law, and even to the prestigious Faculty of Finance and Economics, connected some connections. And now his daughter, who would hardly have been admitted on general grounds, is a student of the best university in the city. No, Megan was not stupid or lazy. She had always done well in school, and she had always done her homework diligently. But it was just that to enter this faculty required a very outstanding ability. The girl didn't have them, so her father helped her. True, among the girl's classmates, as it soon turned out, outstanding abilities possessed few. So many then got into the university this way, either for money or by blat. Megan liked studying, and somehow warm, friendly relations with her classmates were formed at once. A wonderful student time began. Life had changed a lot. Megan felt that very soon she would become an adult and independent, which means that her dream of a loving family is very close. In the 4th year, fate dealt the girl another crushing blow. She was left all alone. Her father is frowning and not talking, but so reliable. In the shop where he worked, a milling machine operator, a gas cylinder failed, and a fire broke out. There were few casualties, but Megan's father was among them. Then left alone in the whole world, Megan realized that all this time felt the support and love of a loved one. Yes, her father had been that kind of man, unable to express his feelings, not saying much. But now Megan realized it, how much he did for her. About a year, the girl came to herself, got used to the new world without her father, and then John appeared in her life. John was a student at their school, but he was in a different department, law school. He, like Megan, was graduating that year. They met at a lecture in the auditorium, which was common for soon-to-be graduates. Young people were told about the very procedure of graduation, state exams and diploma, introduced young people to possible employers, presented companies that offered jobs to the best and most diligent students. It was interesting. Megan happened to be among strangers. Her friends were sitting at the other end of the hall, but Megan was a little late, and there was no seat next to them. So she had to sit where there were still empty chairs. At first, all the girl's attention was focused on the stage. She caught every word of the speakers, even wrote something down. "My bird." An unexpected question took the girl by surprise. She turned around and looked at the speaker. A handsome guy was looking at her with a smile. A wide smile, white teeth, correct facial features, and bright blue eyes. They immediately charmed Megan. There was so much interest in them. The girl suddenly felt that she cared about this man. "It's so depressing," he repeated. "And the weather outside is so beautiful. Spring is in full swing. There's a spring flower festival in the park. Why don't we run away?" It was the first time Megan had ever seen this guy. Besides, the lecture was very important and interesting. And after it, Megan and her friends agreed to go to the library to prepare together for the credit on economic theory. But all this somehow suddenly lost importance, and the girl nodded her head in agreement. The boy glowed, as if her answer made him the happiest man in the world. He confidently took Megan's hand and led her away from the classroom. Some people looked at the couple, but Megan didn't care at all. The weather did turn out to be wonderful. The sun was shining brightly from the clear sky, which was softly blue, and the freshness and purity of the greenery had just blossomed. The air was filled with the aromas of plants beginning to bloom. On the way, the young people got acquainted. It turned out that the guy's name was John. He admitted that as soon as he saw Megan, he couldn't take his eyes off her. "You're just incredibly beautiful," he said, looking at the girl. And she, strangely enough, did not feel a shadow of doubt, although always distinguished by modesty, and even stiff. I looked at you for a long time. I dared to talk to you because I was afraid you'd send me away. And when you agreed to go away with me, it was a weight off my shoulders." Megan was pleased to hear those words. She liked John more and more. What if a girl forbade herself to even dream of such a thing, so as not to be disappointed? What if he was the man she would later start a family with? Yes, these thoughts visited Megan at the first acquaintance. They started dating. John turned out to be a reliable, loving, sensitive man. Having learned the girl's story, it was as if he took her under his wing. He tried to help Megan with everything. The guy even helped her renovate her house. And more precisely, he did it himself, almost alone because the girl did not understand anything about it at all. A little more time passed. The young people graduated from university and both got a job. Megan became an accountant in a small firm for the installation of intercoms. John went as an assistant judge at the local courthouse. Megan knew by then that John was growing up without a father. His mother had given birth to him at a rather late age. As they say, for herself. She was a powerful woman who had spent her entire life in a senior position at the airport. Even now, at her advanced age, she didn't want to leave her position. John kept trying to introduce Megan to her, but for some reason, the girl was afraid of what if John's mother didn't like her. What then if this woman will be against the relationship of the only son with a girl of the lower strata of society? John laughed at these fears. Mom wasn't like that. Yes, she is used to command, but in everything that concerns me, she gives me freedom and autonomy. I've been on my own for 6 years. She's always worked hard, and I've been at home looking after the household. So don't worry, I'm not a mama's boy, and she's not a monster. Still, Megan persisted in making up excuses not to go visit John's mother. Worried, anxious, dreading the meeting. And then John proposed to Megan. It cannot be said that it was quite unexpected. Relationships of young people have long been strong. Both of them could not imagine life without each other. The girl had no doubt that John was the man she had dreamed of since childhood. He gave her everything that Megan lacked: love, attention, care, tenderness. She could talk to him about anything. A soulmate. A soulmate. Sometimes Megan couldn't believe her luck. It might not have happened if she hadn't been in the chair next to John at the lecture that day. It was just such an accident of fate. John did everything beautifully, just like in the movies. He invited Megan to a restaurant to celebrate his small promotion. The girl had no idea of the true motives behind the date. Then suddenly musicians came up to them and played a beautiful melody. Megan, flapping her eyes in surprise, looked at the men in white tails. Then a waiter appeared with a gorgeous bouquet of roses. John took it from the hands of the young man and with a smile presented it to Megan, then deftly pulled out of his pocket a velvet box. "Be my wife." John smiled, looking into Megan's eyes. "You are the most beautiful girl in the world. I love you and I want to be with you always." The girl then even had tears flowing from her eyes, so much she was touched. This proposal, it was made so beautifully. John had carefully prepared for the meeting, so much thought. What was happening resembled a scene from a good, though not too original, melodrama. The young people began to prepare for the wedding. Both decided that they did not need a lavish celebration, just a party with friends from the university and a restaurant. And yet it was necessary to solve a lot of issues, to book a place in the registry office, to find a restaurant, to think over the menu. And, of course, now Megan had to meet John's mom. There was no point in delaying the meeting any longer. Megan remembered the day she'd first seen Martha. She'd been terribly nervous, but the woman who'd opened the door had seemed to be smiling at her genuinely. Tall, slender Martha looked very stylish in her elegant dress, with her hair slicked back smoothly. A real lady, and she behaved in a very friendly and polite manner. Megan realized at once that John's mother belonged to the so-called cold type of women. Careerist, used to work hard, compete, and achieve their goals. John is the same. He does not wait for heart-to-heart talks, warm embraces. No worldly advice. Martha's not going to be a second mom. And in the role of caring grandmother who spoils grandchildren with pies, it is also difficult to imagine her, but it's all nonsense. Martha caused Megan respect and even admiration. You bet, because she has achieved so much on her own and became a boss and a wonderful son raised. All this alone, without the help of her husband or relatives. After the wedding, began to live in Megan's apartment. Both worked. John received a good salary, enough even for some excesses, cafes and restaurants, beautiful clothes, concerts, and most importantly, to travel. For 2 years of marriage, Young managed to go to the sea 5 times. Not to luxury resorts with 5-star hotels, but still it was a wonderful vacation. Cheerful, carefree, full of sunshine and warmth, Megan and John together learned to lead a household. In principle, the young wife knew how to do everything. She had been living alone for a long time, but the head of the family had to learn new skills. Although John coped with it quickly and even as if playfully, Megan felt happier than ever. Next to her was a man who understood her half a word. John listened with interest to Megan's news, accumulated during the day, in all situations took her side, and he often hugged his young wife on and off. Megan realized that she had finally met the man she had long dreamed of and mentally thanked fate for this chance encounter. "I wish our Stephen would turn out to be so smart and responsible," what the young father dreamed, rocking his tiny son in his arms. Megan nodded her head. She had slightly different plans for this child. The young mother wanted Stephen to be happy and healthy, and the rest was not so important. You didn't have to be a factory manager at all to feel joyful and peaceful. Stephen did turn out to be an incredibly curious little boy. He was ahead of his peers in many ways. Early began to walk, early spoke. The baby constantly asked his parents questions, was interested in the world around him, trying to understand literally everything. The newly baptized parents did not want the soul in the firstborn. And when he was about 4 years old, John and Megan decided that it was time to give birth to Stephen's little sister. Megan hoped that she and John would have a daughter. She wanted to give this little girl everything she didn't have herself. Pretty dresses, smart hairstyles at the matinee, talking about girly topics, doing things together in the kitchen and all that. But Richard was born, a wonderful blue-eyed baby boy, charming, charismatic, attracting the attention of others. So what's for the daughter next time? John smiled, rocking the stroller. It was their first family outing of the city. Stephen was holding on to the handle of the stroller too. He was so looking forward to his brother, so excited to see him. True, when Richard was brought home from the hospital, he was a little disappointed. It turned out that Stephen had hoped that his brother would be older right away. He imagined a boy with whom he could play catch-up or hide-and-seek. Time flew by at breakneck speed. It turned out that coping with a couple of little boys at once is not so easy. And then, unexpectedly, Martha came to Megan's rescue. Every day after work, her mother-in-law would rush home, quickly change her clothes, have dinner, and then go straight to her daughter-in-law's house. John was often late in court, sometimes coming in late at night. Megan was exhausted by evening, and it was during this difficult period that Martha appeared. To take care of the grandchildren, she would go out with the little ones to walk in the yard. Sometimes they went further into the park. It was only 2, well, at most 3 hours a day. But how Megan looked forward to them each time. While the kids were away, she had time to clean up, cook something, go to the bathroom, and all in peace and quiet. It seemed like a small thing, but for a young, tired mother, it was a real salvation. How grateful Megan was to Martha. She repeatedly told her mother-in-law about it, and the latter smiled and replied that she herself was happy to communicate with her grandchildren. No, a warm and close relationship between daughter-in-law and mother-in-law had not developed, although Megan wanted it very much. She invited her mother-in-law to tea, tried to start frank conversations, but this woman, she was some too aloof, cold and inaccessible like the Snow Queen. It was either her personality or she didn't like Megan very much. Eventually, Megan stopped worrying about it and accepted the situation as it was. Martha stayed away from her daughter-in-law with advice, reproaches, and moralizing. She showed up when Megan needed her and helped the young mother a lot. Perhaps the woman herself did not even realize how she supported Megan in a difficult period. A little more time passed, the boys grew up. Now both went to the garden, and Megan was finally able to go to work. There was more money in the family. The couple began planning a summer trip to the sea. It was to be their children's first. And then life in the country began to change. Enterprises were closing one after another. That fate befell the firm where Megan worked. The woman was out of work. John's salary began to be delayed steadily, which, by the way, at the new price level was not enough even for the most basic necessities. John was now practically never home at all. After a working day in court, he ran around the city looking for a part-time job. Somewhere to guard a warehouse, somewhere to help unload a truck. The man grabbed every opportunity to bring home an extra. Megan was a housewife now. She was looking for a job in her specialty. She ran to interviews, advertised in newspapers, but there was no result. In the end, the woman couldn't even get a job as a salesman. There was no demand for jobs in their town at that time. Megan was glad that she was able to at least find a job as a cleaner. Now she scrubbed the floors in the entryways of a neighboring house in the early morning while everyone was still asleep. It didn't pay much, but there was a plus side to the job. It ended late in the morning. The whole day was free. Money was scarce. The children were growing at a dizzying rate, and clothes were quickly becoming too small for them. They also needed nutritious meals. This John and Megan could sit on buckwheat or pasta, and the boys need vitamins, meat, fruit, milk. Young spouses were often close to despair. It was Martha who kept them from being completely lost. She was cut down long ago, as she should have been on a well-deserved vacation by age. And just someone needed a warm place, which for a long time was occupied by a firm and principled boss. But Martha managed to save a certain amount of money during the years of work at a fairly high post. She dreamed of buying a small house by the sea where she expected to meet her old age. But circumstances have changed and prices have risen. Now the woman's savings would not be enough for a decent home, and she was not going to buy anything. So Martha used her savings to sponsor the young family every month. Both John and Megan knew if anything happened, they wouldn't be lost. Martha wouldn't let them go under. But at the same time, they both didn't want to abuse the woman's help, so they did their best. It was hard, and yet the feeling of a strong rear end kept them from being discouraged. In spite of everything that was happening, Martha was still unknown to Megan. Her mother-in-law kept her distance from her daughter-in-law, and she didn't hug her son either. But grandchildren are a different matter. Next to them, the woman blossomed. She embraced them without shyness, kissed them, called them affectionate nicknames, and the boys reciprocated. Megan sometimes tried to talk to her husband about it. "Don't worry about it. Mom was always like that." He smiled. "Just a person like that, kind, good, loving. But she does not know how to show her feelings. Maybe it's because Mom grew up in an orphanage. She didn't get love when she was a kid. So she doesn't know how to express her feelings. But she's reliable, and she doesn't abandon her own." When John and Megan's sons went to school, Martha took over the lessons. It turned out that she once, many years ago, wanted to become an elementary school teacher. Then the woman's career took a different path. But now the long-time dream was realized in her grandchildren. Grandmother was inspired by the boys. She knew how to be strict and demanding, but at the same time she emphasized to interest Stephen and Richard, to instill in them a thirst for knowledge, to develop the innate abilities of her grandchildren. While parents tried to get an extra penny and disappeared on earnings, their children did not run homeless in the yard. They were under the reliable supervision of their grandmother, who invested a lot in their development. Stephen and Richard were the best students in their classes. They were also good at sports, because Martha had time to take them to the volleyball section located on the other side of the city. In this sports center, the best coach worked, and Martha did not agree to anything less for her grandchildren. And so they lived, stretched, supported each other, raised their children. And then one day John got tired of working, as the man himself put it, miserable existence. He decided to risk opening his own business. It is clear that the man took the money for the promotion of the business from his mother. And where else? Not by taking out loans from the bank at crazy interest rates. Then the newlyweds had their first son, Stephen. The name was chosen by John, the name of his neighbor, who paid a lot of attention to the boy and became for him a kind of a substitute for his grandfather. He was a respected man, serious, intelligent. He headed a whole local factory for a long time. John bought some technical stuff from a warehouse in a neighboring town, sold it on the market at a higher price, and immediately made a profit, albeit a small one. The success inspired John, so he decided to work in this direction and registered as a sole proprietorship. Megan helped him with the documents. She was an economist, worked as an accountant for a long time, so reporting and primary documentation were completely on her. The couple rented a place in the market and began work. At first, the business was slow. The client base had not yet been built up. Links with suppliers had not been established. Profits in the first few months were either minimal or non-existent. I had to solve many different problems. Sometimes I even wanted to give up, but in the end, the business went on, and the small store earned money. Finally, the family had money, albeit small, but their own. They didn't have to ask Martha for help anymore. John even managed to pay her back the money he had borrowed for the business. Megan knew that her mother-in-law tried to refuse to give this help as a gift to the young family. But John insisted. They flew to the sea after all. The boys were already old enough. Megan watched with what joy they were running along the beach, and her heart sank with delight. What happiness this was. More on that next. John's business grew. Soon the man opened an entire store, then another. Now he had a whole staff working for him, accountants, managers, salespeople. But Megan was given the opportunity not to work and to deal with the house and children. True, the boys had already become teenagers and no longer needed a nanny. But the family moved to a private house, and Megan had a whole garden at her disposal. For its improvement, the woman took up with energy and inspiration. And again she thanked fate for what is happening in her life. The house is a full cup, a loving husband, wonderful, talented children. Every day a reason for joy and pride. And a garden in which Megan felt like a full mistress. Here she felt calm, relaxed, peaceful. The woman believed that her present life was a reward for what she had experienced as a child. She also often regretted that her father did not see how wonderful life was for his daughter. He probably would have been happy for Megan, and he certainly would have cherished his grandchildren. And yet, as time went on, Megan began to realize that something was missing. John had grown distant. No, they still had a wonderful relationship. Her husband was never rude to her, always remembered holidays and their personal dates. Only he was too busy working. He came home late at night, often flew on business trips, literally lived his life. Stephen and Richard are almost adults now. They have their own lives, their own friends, their own interests, and that's fine. It was just a little sad that their sons had grown up so quickly and Megan hadn't had time to fully enjoy their childhood years, too busy trying to survive. Martha remained alien and cold. Such a temperament. Megan probably didn't even know until now how or what to talk to her about. Their only topic of conversation was probably Richard and Stephen. Her mother-in-law had grown old, but she still looked like an iron lady. She lived separately, and she refused to move out of her own apartment, where she was the full mistress, into her son's house. And Megan understood and supported her in this. And in this difficult period in Megan's life, again not happiness. She didn't even believe her feelings at first. She thought she just didn't even seem to allow the thought to be true. But then it became all too obvious. Megan realized she was expecting a baby again after all these years. John seemed overjoyed, but still took the news a little too reservedly. There wasn't the excitement in his eyes that there had been years ago when he had learned of his wife's first and second pregnancies. Wow, so unexpected. He smiled, then pulled Megan close and kissed her. We need to find you the best doctors. We're getting older, you know. Megan understood and was worried too, of course. Being pregnant in your early 20s was very different from being pregnant with a woman in her 40s. There are definitely more risks. The sons took the news of the imminent arrival of a brother or sister positively. Wow, we're going to have a little one. Stephen smiled. It's so weird, but I like the news. It's fun, Richard shook his head. Martha, hearing the news, only shrugged her shoulders. Well, it's unexpected, of course, but it's nothing special. I had John when I was a little younger than you. Everything's going to be all right now. The pregnancy, despite Megan's misgivings, went easily, but as an older woman, she had to undergo more frequent checkups. At the next ultrasound, Megan lay on the cold couch and prayed to herself that the baby would be okay. She, of course, dreamed of a daughter and a long time ago, since childhood. After the birth of her two sons, the wish had been forgotten. And now, when she found out that she was pregnant again, Megan began to hope again, how she wanted to become a mom of a charming girl. The woman chased these thoughts away from herself, convinced that one should be happy with any child. And it was unlikely that after two boys, suddenly such a miracle would happen. Why would it be a girl? Now, lying on the couch, Megan wanted only one thing, that with this child that lives under her heart, everything turned out to be all right. Whether it's a boy or a girl is a matter of 10. Being pregnant with her first sons, Megan didn't know much. Now she had a wealth of information that made her heart clench anxiously and her eyes gaze into the face of the doctor, inserting a sensor across her abdomen to read her emotions. Storina kept thinking the doctor was frowning. How scared she was. Was it really that bad in there? Do you have a girl? Suddenly the man in the white coat said in a calm, mundane tone. A hot wave of joy flooded Megan's heart. She even felt a little dizzy. She hadn't expected to be told the gender so early. And then there was a girl. Was this really happening to her? Had her dream come true after all these years? Is she all right? Megan asked Megan the question she wanted to know. She's fine. No abnormalities. Vivian was born on her due date. Megan had thought of a name for her daughter a long time ago. Back in college, I think. The girl was born a healthy baby and soon became the family's favorite. Martha now came to Megan's house every day to babysit her granddaughter. Once again, her help came in handy. Megan adored her daughter because she had waited so long for her. She had stopped dreaming of such a gift, but sometimes she needed time to take a bath or go shopping alone. And then Martha came to the rescue again. Her time flew by at breakneck speed. Megan knew it was always like that when you have a small child. He's just a helpless little baby. Before you know it, it's already a person with its own personality and hobbies. Vivian turned out to be a pretty little girl. She took after Megan, was the same swarthy, slender, and graceful, but her eyes were her father's, huge, bright blue. They shone on her swarthy, beautiful face. The boys had all grown up. Stephen graduated first. He easily got into the Boston Medical Academy. Stephen must have decided in the 5th grade that he was going to be a doctor. At first, his parents thought it was a frivolous hobby. But as time went on, the eldest son stayed true to his dream. In the end, he entered the medical school, and on the budget. Megan at first was afraid to let the young guy alone in the big city. But Stephen, he was serious enough and independent for such a university. So in the end, his mother had to respectfully accept his decision. A few years later, Richard followed his brother. He, too, entered Boston University, only he chose a different specialty. From childhood, he was attracted to computers, programs, technical puzzles. The sons flew out of the nest. The husband lived a life of work. During this period, Megan realized what a happiness it is that she has a daughter small, beautiful, loved, and loving. She filled women's lives with joy and happiness, made it bright and meaningful. If it weren't for Vivian, Megan would feel all alone and unneeded now. Vivian practiced ballet and the girl was doing great. The choreographers were all saying she had real talent. Megan knew that her daughter went in her. Except that in childhood, Megan did not have such an opportunity to show her gift. Her father, of course, did not take her daughter to a club, but Vivian had succeeded. The girl even traveled with performances in different cities. A real tour, loving, caring mother everywhere accompanied her. It was a bright and saturated life, which gave Megan a daughter. Everything was good, just wonderful. The boys studied and worked in Boston. Megan visited them occasionally. The sons were happy, and that made them happy. John was developing a business that was bringing in more and more profit. Now Karina had a daughter, whose long-standing dream was finally realized. It would seem, live and rejoice. But the woman's heart was increasingly clenched from some vague premonitions. Something was wrong. Megan chased away bad thoughts. She was even going to see a psychologist, but one day, the cause of the vague anxiety revealed itself. Megan had gone to the mall to find a dress for her daughter's next performance. Vivian had caught a cold somewhere in the garden, so Martha stayed with her. Megan went to the mall. The woman was in high spirits. She had managed to find a wonderful outfit for her daughter, and it was just the right size. She imagined how excited her little girl's eyes would be when she saw the outfit. That's when the woman noticed John. She just happened to glance down, going up the escalator, and saw her husband on the first floor in a bright orange shirt, which she herself had given him. It was a stylish shirt with short sleeves, summer, dressy, and elegant at the same time. John liked it immediately, and now he often wore it to work. John wasn't walking alone, but with a young girl in his arms. From afar, Megan couldn't see all the details, couldn't see the stranger's face, didn't have time to estimate her age. But she noticed the main thing. John's hand was resting on the thin waist of the young woman. She, in turn, had her palm in the back pocket of John's pants. John was smiling happily. The world turned upside down in just a few moments. Megan stood on the escalator steps. She considered herself a happy, accomplished woman who had managed to build a strong family. And on the next floor, she arrived already a cheated and betrayed spouse. To gather her thoughts, Megan went up to the food court, settled down at a small table in the far corner of the hall, and ordered herself a coffee. What she had just witnessed, how to explain it? Megan really wanted to find some excuse for what she had seen, but it wasn't working. If she wanted to, she could still convince herself that John was just walking through the mall with a female employee. Maybe they wanted to look at the assortment of competitors or something else. John had his arm around the stranger's waist. Both of them were not embarrassed by the people, who at this time in the mall were plenty. They walked with their arms around each other and smiled as if they were well-off free students. And between them there was clearly a special relationship. It was immediately apparent. Is John cheating on her? It's hard to believe. Almost impossible. But why impossible? Megan began to reflect on her life and realized that she and John had long lived as close relatives, but not as loving spouses. All their conversations revolved around their children and their future. When was the last time they had gone out together? Besides, John was away at work too often, flying on business trips. Maybe it wasn't business trips at all, but traveling with young mistresses. Megan found it hard to breathe, as if she'd been hit in the solar plexus. She couldn't get enough air. Everything was spinning in front of her eyes. Was her happy married life just an illusion? How stupid did she have to be not to see it? Megan decided not to get too excited. She pulled herself together and got up from the table. She'd have to go home and act like nothing had happened. When John returned, she would discreetly take his cell phone and look into his correspondence. Then everything will be clear, and we can do something about it. You need proof. Otherwise, you can fantasize a lot of things. Maybe it's not so bad after all. That night, Megan put her plan into action. She'd always trusted her husband. It had never occurred to her to go through his phone before, and John knew it because his cell phone didn't even have a password. The man had left the phone on the coffee table when he went to the bathroom. He generally assumed that his spouse was already asleep, Megan was awake. As soon as the sound of water came from the bathroom, she slipped out of bed and went downstairs. She grabbed her husband's cell phone, entered his messages, and there was a lot of interesting things. Megan learned that her husband's lover's name was Catherine. She was only 25 years old, not much older than Stephen. Deceived spouse, leafed through numerous photos of a young girl. On them, she showed the advantages of her luxurious figure. Young, incredibly beautiful, daring Catherine was not shy and wrote such things, which rather even think was embarrassing, but John clearly liked it. Apparently, the couple had already had quite a long affair. John was firmly on the hook for the young beauty. They called each other cute nicknames, made plans for a summer vacation. Apparently, the lovers had not the first time traveled together to the sea. It hurt to read this correspondence, but she needed to know what was going on. What she saw shocked her. She did not want to believe that all this was true. The correspondence was also about Megan. Catherine called her lover's wife an old lady. John did not even try to defend his wife. On the contrary, sent in response smiling smiley faces saying it's funny to him. How could this happen to them? They were once the closest and dearest people to each other, two halves of one whole. They had overcome so much together, and suddenly this happened. The sound of the water in the bathroom faded, and Megan hurriedly returned the phone to its place and rushed into the kitchen. Let John think she'd gotten a drink of water. For now, she didn't want to show her husband that she was aware of this ugly affair on the side. She didn't want to, or she just couldn't. She needed to digest the news, figure out how to proceed, realize after all what she really wants, and get used to the idea that John is not a reliable wall, behind which so cozy to hide from the hardships of life and the usual traitor. Outwardly, nothing has changed in the life of the family, but now Megan became more attentive. John's delays at work and his constant business trips were perceived quite differently. From time to time, while John was in the bathroom or out without his phone at the neighbor's, Megan would look at his phone. Catherine texted John often. Some of the messages were quite explicit. They were usually accompanied by pictures of the girl. To give Catherine credit, she looked great. Judging by the state of her body, the girl spent long hours in the gym. From the correspondence, Megan realized that Catherine does not work and does not study. A typical kept woman. John was apparently willing to pay for it all. No, Megan knew that men just over 40 often pay attention to young nymphs. They probably feel younger, more energetic, stronger than their peers. And what is there to hide? 25-year-old friends are generally much more attractive than 40-year-olds, but the woman thought that her family would not be affected by this. She remembered the way John had looked at her, what he had said to her. He had genuinely loved Megan. Once upon a time, she had never doubted that. Could such feelings also grow cold with time? Catherine was no longer just a lover or a girl for occasional entertainment, who could be dumped at any time, swapped for another. John and his young lady's relationship was about 5 years old. Sometimes historical dates were glimpsed in their correspondence, and the oldest ones were around the time Vivian was born. Apparently, that was when they had met. Megan remembered that period of time after giving birth and with a newborn baby in her arms. She didn't feel very well. She probably looked even worse. Megan was completely focused on her health. She didn't even have the energy for her sons at the time. Thankfully, by the time they were born, her sisters had long since managed to become fully independent young men. Of course, Megan paid almost no attention to her husband because, as it seemed to her, there was no need. A grown man passionate about his work. But maybe that was where the mistake lay. Maybe she herself was to blame for what was happening to their family now. Megan shook her head and chased away the wrong thoughts. What was her fault? It was John, after all, who had decided to look for fun aside. No would have supported his wife in her time of need, to take on some of the responsibilities, to take care of his spouse and newly born daughter. No, John chose another option. Catherine may not be his first mistress. John had been estranged for a long time, after all. Megan realized that clearly now. It's just that the woman preferred not to notice such trifles as distant alarm bells. He earns money, does everything for the family, does not drink, does not beat, does not humiliate. In money does not limit. Well and wonderful. What else is there to complain about? Megan wasn't complaining. She lived and enjoyed a happy, as it seemed to her, family life. And then suddenly it hit her. Maybe Catherine was not John's first mistress, but that it was with her he had a serious enough relationship, Megan did not doubt. John was truly in love with the girl. It could be felt in the tone of his messages. What only affectionate words he did not call his mistress. The man protected his lady from domestic, financial, and any other problems, gave her gifts, was constantly interested in her desire. It pained Megan to read this. Perhaps he had never behaved like that with her, even in the golden years of their marriage. It was understandable then. They were spinning, surviving, pulling children not to sentimentality. Megan realized that Catherine was getting on John's nerves about the divorce. "Well, and when you already divorce your old lady," wrote the girl, supplying the message with red from anger emoticons. "All in due time, baby," answered John. "I'd like more details. I'm in the process. A lot of things need to be prepared so that we can live not only happily but also richly. My princess loves a beautiful life." John's usually reserved and serious demeanor made Megan almost nauseous, but she continued to read the messages, looking for information about the upcoming divorce. She was more interested in this issue than any other, because it directly affected her and the children. Megan wasn't particularly worried about how her sons would take the divorce. They were adults and both of them had been living on their own for a long time. For them, most likely little will change. But the daughter, she is accustomed to this house and adores her father. Despite his indifference, the little girl would be very worried. Megan had no doubt about that, and something would have to be done about it. John's messages sometimes slipped in that he was taking his time with the divorce to properly prepare for leaving. What would that mean? The spouse was clearly up to something, and Megan wanted to find out what it was about. As far as her relationship with her spouse was concerned, nothing much had changed since Megan had found out about Catherine. Faking ignorance was easy. Megan and John hadn't spoken in a long time. Hey, how are you? How are the kids? That's all they talked about. And that's the life they've had for a long time. How come Megan didn't realize this before? I guess she was too busy with her daughter and her own worries and plans. She didn't tell Martha the details of her son's life, of course. She still came over sometimes to play with her granddaughter. There were times that Megan took and Vivian to her grandmother to go on business. But the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law never became warm and frank. Over the years, Megan had trusted Martha completely in everything about the baby. Perhaps it was the only person with whom the woman could leave her daughter with a light heart. But otherwise, over the years, Martha and Megan had remained largely strangers to each other. No, of course, Megan couldn't tell Martha about John, though she wanted to share it with someone. Why worry the older woman? Of course, she'd be upset to hear about her son's behavior. Will be worried it will negatively affect her health. Of course, the mother-in-law will still find out about the divorce, which of course she will. Even if John did not plan this procedure, Megan herself would have organized it, because cannot live with a traitor. That's how she perceived her husband now. If you're in love with someone else, say so. Why lie, why hide, why scheme? John never once scolded Catherine when she insulted Megan in her messages. And the old woman had called her both fat and stupid. John had at best ignored those unflattering remarks, at worst responded with laughing emoticons. It was hurtful. But Megan was much more interested in her husband's vague promises to divorce her as soon as everything was financially settled. The spouse was preparing something, some kind of scam, the results of which Megan was to be left with nothing. The man didn't write about it directly. It is understandable correspondence with his mistress had a completely different character, was light, humorous, in some places hot. But from some of the words and hints, Megan knew John was up to something. But how would she know what surprise to expect? Surely John and his mistress would discuss the details of the plan when they met. Megan, understandably, felt the whole situation hard. The pain of betrayal of a loved one, a vague future suspended state, all this frightened her, and there was no one to share it with. Had her mother been alive, how much easier would this trouble have been to bear? Megan slept badly, became nervous, pale and thin, irritable and withdrawn. Her physical condition even worsened, with headaches. One morning, as Megan was feeding her daughter breakfast, her mother-in-law called. "Are you home now?" Martha asked. "Yes," Megan answered. "John's at work, but my daughter and I are home." "Great, I'll be right there." Megan was overjoyed. "That's great. That means the mother-in-law can take care of her granddaughter. Meanwhile, she's going to go to the doctor. She's been having a lot of headaches. Have them prescribe some pills. I can't stand it anymore." Martha showed up as usual with a present for her granddaughter. A beautiful doll in a big pink box. The girl threw herself on her grandmother's neck. No, not because of the toy, of course, but there was just a special bond between Martha and Vivian. The grandmother and granddaughter seemed to understand each other without words. Megan had seen something like that before with her sons. Martha was a wonderful grandmother to all her children, sensitive, caring, attentive. It was surprising, considering her bossy, somewhat cold nature. Surprising, but wonderful. It's so nice to know that your children are so loved by someone other than you. "Good morning." Megan smiled at her mother-in-law. "It's so good to have you here. Vivian missed you." "I actually came to see you today." The smile that had been directed at her granddaughter slid off the older woman's face. She stared at her daughter-in-law. Megan immediately tensed, sensing that this was going to be a serious matter. "Go in the living room and watch cartoons." "Okay?" Megan turned to her daughter. She nodded her head and obediently slipped out of the room. She promised her mother and grandmother that they would join her soon to play with the new dolls. Martha and Megan were left alone in the kitchen. "What was that about? What did you want to talk to me about?" Megan asked. Martha didn't answer right away. It was obvious that she was having a hard time starting a conversation. Her mother-in-law sat down on a chair behind the counter that divides the kitchen into two parts. Megan sat across from her. "Do you know that John has been the only person near and dear to me for a long time?" Martha said at last. "Until the grandchildren came along and you." Megan nodded. Of course she knew that. Martha had been pulling her son along on her own, working all her life, making sure the child had everything she needed, and yet not basking in gold, but really raising John, always making time for him. When her husband talked about his childhood, Megan sometimes wondered where Martha, working at such a responsible high position, took the strength to do so much with the child. She went hiking with him, and took him to museums, circuses, theaters, and every evening read books to him, and checked his lessons, and taught him everything around the house from cleaning and cooking to fixing the faucet. It's a tremendous amount of work. Megan realized this fully when she became a mother herself. "I tried to raise John to be a good person. Not only smart and successful, but also reliable and decent, not like his father. For a long time I thought I had succeeded, but the genes seemed to have taken their toll." Martha looked so sad at this point that Megan wanted to hug her, but the gesture wouldn't have been natural for them, so the woman held back. "I never told about John's father, not even to him," he asked, of course, especially when he was a teenager. "I explained to him then that I really wanted a child. Age was pushing it, too. I didn't see any candidates for the role of father of the future baby around me. That's why I went to the resort that summer, to give myself a long-awaited gift. I lied to John then that I specifically made a resort romance there in order to give birth for myself. He wasn't the only one who thought so, by the way I'd announced to everyone that my pregnancy was a conscious move, but it wasn't." Megan was silently catching every word. That frankness. Martha, it had never been so open. Martha was about 35 at the time, by today's standards a very young woman with everything ahead of her. Back then she was considered an old maid. All deadlines for becoming a mother and wife had been missed. The train had left. Martha was not particularly worried about it. She devoted herself fully to her work. She had a responsible position, and there was always a lot to do. The woman liked to realize that she was such an important, indispensable person at the airport. She was respected, listened to, and even feared. Sometimes she regretted that she had not had a child and probably would not have one. But Martha didn't worry about that. She herself had grown up in an orphanage. She had seen so many unhappy fates and was not 100% sure that she could be a good mother and make her baby happy. That summer she was sent on a trip to the sea from the airport. Martha could afford to buy the tickets herself, but the union honored her as Employee of the Year. It's nice to be recognized and appreciated. The sanatorium turned out to be just wonderful. Comfortable room, sea in 5 minutes walk, wonderful dining room in walking distance. And there, in this sanatorium, Martha met her future father, John. It was a so-called business trip. A young guy about 10 years younger than Martha. He came from some northern town to work. It was Alex's first time at sea, and at first he looked a little dazed. It was even cute when Martha first noticed him in the dining room. The young man caught her eye immediately. He was good, really good, hair the color of ripe wheat, bright blue eyes. Those eyes would eventually play a key role in Martha's fate. He had amazing eyes, and I guess they were the reason I fell in love with him like a girl. I don't think I'd ever experienced anything like that even in my youth. Bottomless, bright blue, attentive. John inherited them. Richard and Stephen too, by the way. Alex had no idea he had a son and grandchildren, and that they had his eyes. Martha was now looking everywhere with her eyes for the handsome boy. At first she didn't understand why she did it, but he was a young man, so he was sure he would soon have no shortage of admirers like himself, young, lovely creatures. And so it was. For several days Martha watched from afar as Alex returned to the sanatorium with one and another beauty. All of them were just like a selection, slim, tanned, smiling. Alex smiled a lot himself. He had a wonderful smile. From it the guy had charming dimples on his cheeks. One day the young handsome man himself approached Martha. Alex confessed to me that he had been watching me for a long time. He's incredibly attracted to me. It was unexpected to hear that. A young, handsome guy, whom I had been admiring from afar for about a week, was giving me compliments that made my head spin. I was desperately jealous of all those young beauties with whom he appeared in the sanatorium. And he, it turns out, at the same time dreamed of me and did not dare to approach, did not dare, because he was afraid of rejection. According to him, I looked beautiful and inaccessible. Martha began a stormy resort romance. They walked a lot in the neighborhood, swam at night in the sea, laughed. Martha felt 10 to 15 years younger next to him. It seemed she had never laughed so much even in her youth. It's been a wonderful week. I fell in love. I just lost my head, which doesn't usually happen to me. It was so unlike me. Alex had me under a spell, and I didn't notice a lot of things, a lot of obvious things. Martha always paid for her companion in cafes, at the canteen, on excursions. He never gave her anything, she never expected it. Being around this guy was a gift in itself. Then one day Martha woke up in her room, expecting to see Alex next to her. They'd taken a long walk along the night promenade, gazing at the stars, talking about everything, and had fallen asleep with their arms around each other in the morning. Martha felt so happy and peaceful in the arms of her lover. But when she woke up, she didn't see Alex beside her. Martha stretched and rolled over onto her other side. She was still not alert for anything. This had happened before. Alex had probably just gone out for coffee and pastries to surprise her. How nice it was to have someone care for you like that. Martha dozed for another half an hour, enjoying the peace and quiet. But the longer she was alone, the more she realized something was wrong. Finally, the woman, unable to bear the anxiety any longer, got up, and then everything became clear. Alex's belongings were gone, not his clothes, not his favorite wristwatch. He'd even remembered to bring a little thing like perfume and a toothbrush. So Alex left while Martha was asleep. He left quietly, so as not to wake the woman and explain himself to her. Why was everything fine yesterday? A wave of longing and despair and resentment swept into Martha. It became difficult to breathe. She wandered around the room and could not find a place to go. Her heart clenched with unbearable pain. Martha thought she had found her soulmate. Alex had been so easy for her, so pleasant. Even though he was much younger, Martha felt supported by him. Nothing had foreshadowed this outcome. Just last night Alex had hugged her tightly, showering her with kisses and compliments. He was seriously planning a future together. The guy lived in a small town in the north. He even called Martha to go there, and she was ready to give up her career, apartment, friends, everything, just to be near him. In desperation, Martha opened her closets again and again. Maybe Alex had just moved his things? What about himself? Maybe he was late for some reason. But Alex's clothes were nowhere to be found. Martha noticed some of her own things were missing. A box of gold jewelry. Martha had taken a small part of her tame jewelry on vacation, but they were her favorite 2 pairs of earrings, a dainty chain, and a bracelet with small sapphires. Original, exquisite pieces that you couldn't buy in every store. Martha's bracelet was imported from Germany. Now this jewelry box has disappeared. There was no half-empty bottle of Chanel No. 5 on the shelf in the bathroom. In the safe closet, the woman was missing 3-year-old dresses, which she bought when she was on vacation in Riga. Her heart clenched with a bad feeling. So is Alex just a criminal? I should probably write a report to the police. On the other hand, it was shameful to have to confess to strangers that she had lost her head in the arms of a young traitor and trusted him blindly. And a grown woman boss. Even Martha sat down on the sofa, hugged herself tightly, and began to sway. That's what she used to do when she was just a little girl. Martha had grown up in an orphanage. There you couldn't get comfort and sympathy from adults. So the girl got into the habit of hugging herself when she became an adult. Martha somehow outgrew this ritual, and in a moment of stress and despair, the habit returned. It was necessary to leave the stuffy room and take a walk along the shore. The fresh sea breeze would give strength and bring relief. Martha walked to the front door and noticed a note. Alex had left her some kind of message on the mirror. The heart glad for 3 fed a faint hope that everything would still be fine. Maybe the young man is just preparing some kind of surprise. And here she almost went crazy with worry. But the miracle didn't happen. Alex did run away. Only for some reason it was important for him to explain his behavior to Marta. You've probably figured it out by now. Are you crying? You look at me, scolding yourself for being so gullible. I don't know why I'm writing all this. Usually I just leave. But you're really special. I can't do what I do to others. I really like you. You're strong and noble. You're also really beautiful. Probably any man would be happy with you, but not me. I realized a long time ago that my happiness is different from the idea of a prosperous life of most people. I like adventure, a change of location, meeting new people. I realized long ago that I can never be with one single woman. Family, children. Everyday life is not for me. That's the way I was born. My mother says I took after my father. I never knew him, by the way. He's also a vagabond, an adventurer. Probably this man does not even know of my existence. It doesn't matter. Of course I haven't told you a word of the truth. Well, almost know the fact that you are very beautiful, smart, strong. I really think so. Those words of mine were sincere. As for my biography, I named the wrong city. I lied about my age. My name isn't even Alex. That's my favorite part of making up a cover story, pretending to be someone else. Some people think of me as a young actor, some as a talented young engineer. It all depends on the inspiration. Sometimes it comes to me and I compose a story about a tragic fate. It is fascinating, interesting, exciting. And women like it. I know how to make them happy, even if only for a short time. Those burning eyes of yours, those admiring glances. I make the gray everyday life of single ladies bright, colorful, magical. And for all this in life, you have to pay. That's why I charge a small fee for happy weeks and days. You have to admit, it's only fair. Our week was one of the happiest weeks of your life, wasn't it? I'm moving on. New adventures, new stories. And you? No offense. You're really special to me. I usually leave in silence, I don't leave notes. But I wanted to explain myself to you. Martha hurried on, staring at the piece of paper, the reading hard to fit in her head. Alex, who isn't even Alex, is a professional Alfonso, living off women, flitting through life like a careless moth. He plays different roles and enjoys it. Most likely we are talking about some kind of special mental disorder. But a normal person can't live like that. Strangest of all, after reading the note, Martha agreed with Alex. The guy was right. This week was really the brightest and happiest in her life. Martha decided to keep this story in the depths of her memory, sometimes to come back to it again, to feel those bright, positive emotions that Alex gave her. But it turned out differently. When Martha returned from vacation, she realized that she was expecting a child. I realized that it was Alex's child, a man who was probably not quite mentally healthy, but I decided to keep it because, first of all, I was tired of being all alone, and secondly, probably I still loved Alex. Or rather, the image that that young man had created. At the due date, a wonderful, healthy, and strong boy was born. He had Alex's eyes. Martha had noticed that back in the hospital. The handsome, charming baby inherited other features of his father's appearance. He bore little resemblance to Martha. The woman prayed that the son's resemblance to Alexei would be limited to external features. Martha, knowing about the genes inherited by John, therefore paid special attention to the upbringing of her son. She developed responsibility, honesty, and kindness in him, and John seemed to grow up to be a wonderful guy. Martha anxiously searched for the traits of a reckless adventurer, as his father was, but did not find them. John faithfully did his homework, never skipped classes at school, and then at the university. When the boy grew up, Martha watched his relationships with girls with bated breath. But even here, John did not resemble Alex. Before Megan, the guy dated a former classmate. They were a couple for several years in a row. No torrid short-term affairs. When her son married Megan, Martha exhaled. It's okay. John has a beautiful wife, great kids, his own business. No, the son is nothing like the character of a careless Alfonso father. It was a success, but it turned out I'd been too early. Martha shook her head. Now I'm going to have to tell you the bitter and ugly truth about John. I kept silent while it was none of my business. Went through everything inside me. But now the welfare of my grandchildren is at stake. I can't let them be left with nothing. Megan realized what she was about to talk about. To make it easier for her mother-in-law, she spoke up. I know he's cheating on me. John has a young mistress. I've seen them together and even read the sweet couple's correspondence. Really? Martha's eyebrows rose in surprise. And why didn't you scandalize him? How did you even survive it? I'm just at a loss, Megan admitted. Having someone to talk to made her feel better. Yes, it was John's mother. But Megan sensed that she was completely on her side. I see. Martha nodded. Anybody would be confused. So you know about this, Catherine? Megan nodded, then asked. But how did you know about it? John told me, Martha said. He said he'd been unhappily married for a long time. That you, as his wife, didn't pay any attention to him. You'd lost yourself in the children and the house, become uninterested and indifferent. The usual male excuses. It was painful to realize that the only child in which so much invested in is capable of such a thing. Apparently, the genes still took their toll. Though not immediately, Megan could barely hold back her tears. But maybe he's right. I did have a lot to do with the kids in the house. Maybe John really did lack attention. I wish we had talked about it in time. He's wrong, Martha said flatly. There's more to it than that. Sometimes the feeling goes away. It happens, and it's normal, but this is different. John is lying to you, cheating on you, and that's the worst part. He and Catherine are going to leave you with nothing. You and the kids. How? Megan gasped. She was used to the idea of John cheating on her, and here was a new shock. It seemed to her that her husband adored children and would do anything to provide them with a happy future. And now this. Although these hints about preparing for divorce, this is their plan. It's sad. Martha shook her head. When I heard him, I wanted to give up the plan and my son right away. But then I decided to keep my emotions to myself. If I didn't agree, they'd think of something else. John felt like a happy man. He had achieved a lot in life, built a whole mini-empire, organized a network of plumbing stores. The man had a right to be proud of himself. His family life up to now, everything suited him: a beautiful wife, wonderful children, well-adjusted life. It was a kind of quest to get for the family funds, buy a new car, change the apartment to a large house. And then these tasks somehow ceased to fascinate and bring joy. It became too easy. John no longer needed money. They were enough for new acquisitions, and for traveling, and for children's education. The man suddenly got bored, and then just at this very moment, in his life appeared Catherine, young and energetic, loving adventures and adventures. She worked as a saleswoman in one of his stores. One evening, John stopped by the store to talk to the accountant, but the woman was no longer at work. Behind the counter, however, stood a new saleswoman, incredibly beautiful. She's openly flirting with the boss. But how can you resist? No, at first John resisted his feelings. His mother from childhood brought up in him responsibility, hammered into his head the true values of the family, so it was difficult for a man to make this step. But when it happened, John realized that all these years he had lived in the captivity of his own attitudes. With Catherine, John felt young and energetic again. She was as adventurous and capable of abnormal behavior as he was. Existence without this girl now seemed to John bland and boring. so it went on for several years. Feelings did not subside, on the contrary, flared up with renewed vigor. John was literally bewitched by his young, beautiful mistress. He did not want to part with her for a moment, but almost every evening he had to return to the boring Megan. The very atmosphere of the house, once warm and cozy, was weighing on John. He felt like he was in a prison. The lovers talked more and more about John needing to divorce Megan. It was a done deal. True, both of them did not want one thing: that half of all the property accumulated during the years of marriage passed into the ownership of the legal spouse. She wasn't working, was she? Catherine was indignant. She sat at home, cooking borscht, relaxing, watching soap operas while you worked. In justice, all property should belong to you and only you. That's true, John sighed. But the law is the law. Megan will be given half of the property acquired during the marriage. But isn't there a loophole in those laws? You're in a position to hire a good lawyer to figure something out. And one day there was a loophole. It was simple and complicated at the same time. It was suggested by a lawyer who was familiar with such issues. "I have already had such cases in practice," said a man in a stylish suit. "You need to sign over all the property to a person you trust. And your wife should trust him too. Maybe a close friend or relative. My clients explain this to spouses to preserve assets in case of business problems. Everyone has their own theory, and then you can initiate divorce proceedings. There is no property, there is nothing to divide, and the trusted person, after everything, just rewrites houses, apartments, cars on the already divorced spouse, that is, on you. That's it." John thought for a long time. After this conversation, he had only one candidate for the role of such a trustee: his mother. Megan would easily agree to sign over all the property to her. She trusts her mother-in-law, but how to go to her mother with such a request? She would have to confess everything to her, and yet there was no other way. John decided to have a serious conversation. He realized his mother would not be happy about the situation. But she's his mother, she will support her son and help him. It was a shame to give Megan half of what he earned. Especially since Megan did not work, lived a quiet and relaxed life. What right does she have to all this? Martha listened to her son in silence, not interrupting. As always, she looked unperturbed and somewhat detached. The only thing that betrayed the older woman's anxiety was her fingers, which tugged relentlessly at the long sleeve of her sweater. "Have you made up your mind?" Martha asked when her son had finished. Yes, he nodded. "Ooh. Don't you feel sorry for Megan?" "I've fallen out of love with her. She's clearly indifferent to me. What are we going to do? Spend the rest of our lives together? What about assets? She hasn't invested a dime in the house or anything else. So that's fair. I was the only one working. She provided for you," Martha reminded me. "And she raised your children. Thanks to Karina, you could think of nothing else but the development of the business. She always took care of the rest. And remember Megan at first, she helped you a lot. Doing those reports at night, doing those estimates. That's when you got a staff of accountants." "You're exaggerating, Mom. You're exaggerating what she did." "All right. And the children?" It was obvious that Marta was struggling to keep it together. "What about the children? Am I going to pay child support for them? That's how I'll help them. So you'll help me?" After a short silence, Martha nodded her head. John could see in her eyes that her mother didn't approve of what he was doing. Well, he hadn't expected anything else. The important thing was that she agreed. John signed over all the property to Martha. Megan did not suspect anything. She immediately believed in the fairy tale that John, in this way, just avoid unnecessary risks. Megan hadn't been paying much attention to anything lately. All her time and attention was devoted to her young daughter. Well, all the better. Catherine was as excited as a child. You bet, because everything was going so smoothly, without a hitch. It seemed to open up a happy, carefree future ahead. Catherine and John planned to celebrate their success with a trip to the sea. They had already chosen a resort, even argued a little about it. One day, when all the property was already rewritten to Martha, John dared to have a frank conversation with Megan. The man, of course, was worried. All the same to inform the person, with whom he lived so many years, such news, not very pleasant. But Megan took it all surprisingly calmly. Naive woman, apparently, has not yet realized that she will not get anything in the divorce. She wouldn't find out until the courtroom, and even if she finds out sooner, there's nothing she can do about it. John officially moved into the apartment he'd rented for Catherine. Now it was just the two of them, waiting for the court hearing after which Megan would have to leave home. In the very apartment where they lived before John succeeded, on the street, the ex-wife and daughter will not stay. And the boys, they're already living in another city. Independent young men. You don't have to worry about them at all. And now, finally, the day has come. John and Catherine have waited so long for this date. Today, at last, it will be over. John will get freedom. A little later, will sign everything from his mother to himself, and the sweet couple will fly to the beach with white soft sand. Catherine decided to go to the meeting with her beloved. She wore an elegant suit, emphasizing the advantages of her luxurious figure, made light makeup, let her hair down. John once again admired the beautiful beloved. Yes, she looked like a supermodel from the cover of a magazine. In his youth, John had never dreamed of such girls, and here he was, a stunning beauty in love with him. In the conference room, John noticed Megan at once. She looked surprisingly calm and dignified. For some reason, Martha was sitting next to her, wearing the suit she had worn as an airport employee on the days when she needed luck. His mother's presence confused John. He wondered why she was here. She's sitting next to Megan. Come to support her sister-in-law. Odd, considering their plan. Catherine tensed at the sight of her future mother-in-law. She disliked Martha. She realized that the older woman was not happy that the young girl had broken up her son's tight-knit family. So what? What did her opinion matter? Absolutely none, she thought. Martha greeted her son and his companion with a nod of her head. Megan, on the other hand, said hello loud and friendly, even smiled. The hearing began. The judge read the divorce decree, determined the place of residence of the minor daughter with her mother, and announced the amount of alimony that must now be paid monthly on Vivian John. And then it came to the most important thing of all, property. Since you don't share any property, there is nothing to divide, the judge concluded. The wife's marital home remains hers. In general, that's not all. What about the gift? Martha spoke from her seat. As for your gift, it's not a subject for a court of law. What gift deed? John jumped up, his heart clenched with misgivings. Catherine, sitting next to him, smiled happily. She did not suspect anything yet. A deed of gift for all your family's property, which I made out to Megan, Martha replied, looking pointedly at her son, Megan, and the grandchildren. What did you think? I'm going to leave them on the street with nothing, so you can have a nice life while they all live in a cramped apartment. John's eyes blurred. Such a man did not expect such a mother. He looked at Catherine, beautiful face. The girl skewed. There was an evil grimace. She opened and closed her mouth in surprise. She tried to say something, but not a single word escaped her tongue. She even seemed to be out of breath. Megan looked calm and peaceful. The judge read out some more formalities regarding the divorce. Martha was whispering about something with her sister-in-law, and it was slowly dawning on John that it was over. Of course, Catherine would leave him now. She would not stay with him through the hard times. That's for sure. She would have to start all over again. All over again.
It had been snowing for days. The snowflakes were so delicate and the snowdrifts were so airy, like in a fairy tale read to little children by their mothers or grandmothers at bedtime. There was no wind and nothing prevented this beauty from sitting on the eyelashes and hair, making beautiful the already beautiful girls. Alice walked with her head held high and caught snowflakes with her mouth. They had another fight with her mom, Megan, who was against her relationship with John. She didn't like this handsome, tall brunette who had charmed her daughter as soon as he offered her a ride home. Despite his youth, he was making good money, having a profession that always kept him in the money. He was a plastic surgeon. Of course, not without the help of his father, Victor. He had his own clinic, where after the institute and came to work his son, John. John did not immediately become a leading surgeon, but the attitude of his son, his persistence, Victor was impressed. He was stingy on praise, but he supported his son and saw in him a future thrifty owner of his brainchild. Alice also liked the young man. She was not a beauty, but she was damn good. She was a part-time student at a law university, and worked as a paralegal. The salary was low, but the prospect of working in the prosecutor's office forced the girl to work hard. Mom, where she could insert her 5 kopecks, and tried to spoil the relationship between the young people. Today, Mom surpassed herself, having time to answer the cell phone while her daughter was taking a shower and say that Alice is busy all evening and asked not to disturb her. Mom, who asked you to answer John like that? We have plans for tonight. Do you want me to go and live in an apartment? It's about time I did, by the way. A grown girl should be separated from her parents. So you can go out with nasty boys without interference. Did I get that right? Ma, why did you like him so much? He's handsome, smart, rich, in love with me, and you're just some kind of demon in you. What kind of profession is a plastic surgeon? Where 24/7s, he has naked rich women shaking their tits in front of him to make them 5 times bigger. How much interest does he have left at the end of the day, let alone the week, for his wife? Answer me, please. Ma, what about male surgeons, gynecologists? I can't imagine that either. I'm asking you to wrap it up. Dustin, my friend Maria's son, wants to meet you. He's a good kid. He works in a bank, goes to economics, and he's the right age for you. I see you've already made up your mind for me. You shouldn't do that to me, Monty. I've known Dustin a long time. We used to sit in the sandbox together and sell each other sandpits. I only see him as a friend, and he sees me the same way, by the way. Megan wanted to say something else to her daughter in favor of Dustin, but Alice ran out of the house, so as not to hear how her mother would use her last, most murderous argument, clutching at her heart. Call an ambulance. You're making me sick again. John had his own idea of a family. He wanted to live in the country in his own house, to have children, a wife who would not work, and a dog. He adored sheepdogs. But Alice did not want to stay at home. She liked to benefit the family both financially and morally, not to guard the house all day long with a sheepdog. John respected her opinion, but he did not understand why sitting at home could not develop and remain an interesting person. You can't rely only on your husband. A woman should also be sure that if she is alone, she will be able to provide for herself. We haven't married yet, and you're already alone. I don't like this attitude, John said in an offended tone. No, not at all. I meant that a woman should not live only at the expense of a man, but she should be worth something herself. No offense. And she smiled that inimitable smile that made a man's heart beat at an accelerated pace. A week later, Alice rented a room not far from her work, so she wouldn't have to pay for a cab when she was late. The room was in a 1-bedroom apartment she shared with a woman in her 40s who had come to Washington to work. Megan hadn't believed until the last minute that her daughter would decide to leave her parents. You're gonna take me to my grave? Where are you gonna go? Daria, I'm asking you to stop pushing her. You've given her a hard time. What? Are you talking to me? You. Remember when you ran away from home to your mom's loud tantrums? Nothing stopped you, not even her threats. Why don't you let your child breathe? Could you be quiet right now? No, I can't. Go on, my daughter, but don't forget to call us. Of course I won't. I know you're a good girl, and he kissed his favorite daughter. The mother stood offended, but kissed her too and asked them not to forget. Her parents stood at the window and waved at her. After looking around in her new abode, Alice immediately called John. Hi, I'm inviting you to a housewarming party. What kind of a housewarming? Did you move in? No, just me. I'll be living apart from my parents now. Write down the address. He arrived an hour later with a trunk full of groceries, champagne, and all the goodies from the restaurant. They had a feast for the world. They stayed up late. Both of them did not want to part, but they found the strength to say goodbye and say goodnight to each other. For her age, Alice was a wise enough girl, and John liked her not as an object for flirting, as there were plenty of such candidates, but as a person who could offer a real serious relationship. After she moved in, they both began to feel that they were a family. After work, he would go to the store, buy flowers for his beloved, then something for tea and hurry home. He, of course, dreamed a little bit about another house, but he began to understand the proverb that with a sweet paradise and in a shalash, Alice tried to make a cozy room from a foreign, cold housing. From the house, the girl brought lovely trinkets, books, changed the curtains, hung favorite photos, thereby turning the room into a cozy nest, which wanted to fly and spend all free time in it. They hardly ever quarreled with John, but if they did, it was a storm. It came on suddenly, but it was good that it didn't last forever. They were both resilient. Toward nightfall, he would go home, though he wanted to stay. John was more experienced than this girl and saw that she was not ready for such a close relationship and did not insist. It happened on New Year's Eve, which they decided to celebrate together in this small room. But the man wanted to be a real Santa Claus on New Year's Eve and surprise Alice. In the travel agency, he got to a real professional, and she recommended the Dominican Republic. So far away, it's at the end of the world, near Cuba, right in the Atlantic Ocean. That's right. But there won't be a decorated Christmas tree, the main attribute of New Year's Eve. Don't worry about that. The locals will put up palm trees instead of the usual Christmas trees, and you'll have a festive atmosphere. The sea there is warm. Sunsets will amaze you with their colors, and a large number of entertainment will not give boredom on New Year's vacations. The time difference will allow you to start celebrating New Year's Eve in the afternoon. You will dance on sandy beaches and build castles instead of snowmen. And there will be plenty of snow and cold for you when you get back. She had such a delicious story to tell, backed up by amazing photos that he gave up. He had to wish his beloved a happy new year a week early. She had to prepare herself morally, and most importantly, to prepare her mother. Sunday afternoon was a parents' day. She would arrive at their house in the afternoon and be there practically until evening. Sometimes we had to help with cleaning and ironing. Mom didn't like that. "Ma, I'm going to the Dominican Republic for New Year's Eve," Alice said and kept quiet. There was no answer, and she thought that her mother had not heard. "Ma, I hear you, I hear you. I'm just trying to find the words to answer you in a civilized way. Aren't you happy for me? I'll tell you this, don't jump headfirst into this relationship. This trip might keep you from graduating. You know what I mean, right? And education is very important. Everything is new to you in this relationship. Everything is new. Everything is new. Everything is exciting. If John loves you, he'll take care of you and let you graduate without jeopardizing your relationship. Don't you agree?" "I think I'm with my mom on this one," Harry said. "Think about your future, my daughter." "I understand, and I'll try not to disappoint you." On December 30, they left. There were many people who wanted to celebrate New Year's Eve in a warm place. The hotel room was bigger than the 3-room apartment of Alice's parents. It was a 5-star hotel, and from the windows of the room they had a magnificent landscape. They met the new year in bathing suits and swimming trunks. Those who have vacationed here not the first time thoughtfully brought tinsel and masks. It was great and fun. At midnight they bathed and wished each other Happy New Year. In the morning they returned to the hotel, and the long-awaited night came, which, as it turned out, was waiting not only for John. She both wanted and dreaded that night. Afraid of not liking the man, afraid of doing something wrong, afraid of everything, until John held her in his arms. He was the first man in her life, and trusting him made her feel far away from that hotel room. Her sensuality was just awakening, and she was giving her lover all of herself and dissolving in him. Now she waited for night every day, waiting for the night to enjoy the man she loved again. She caught herself thinking that she would like to have a child with John, but remembering her mother's words, she told herself, "Not now." It was as if she'd been to heaven on earth. At times like this, time flies fast, and no matter how much you want to go back, you have to. Washington met them with frost and snowfall. Parting, Alice hugged John and thanked him for the New Year's gift. "Darling, do you want to strangle me?" But what a beautiful death it would be, in the arms of a woman. I never said that to anyone. She raised her big eyes to the man, but I'll tell you, you are wonderful, John. You're lovely too. And so they parted, but not for long. Days went by, months went by months. The warm season and their first little anniversary were approaching. They met in the summer. It was raining so hard, with thunder. Nature as if taking a shower, after which she wanted to put on beautiful clothes and shine bright colors. It was in such a rain that John offered her a ride. She gladly dived into his warm mariachi and, baring her teeth, said, "Thank you for not letting me be lost. I'm Alice. I'm a doctor, so it's my duty to save those who need my help." Drove her all the way home and left without even asking for his phone number, and the girl really liked him. A handsome brunette, about 25, older than her and very confident. John had a complicated relationship with the daughter of the hen doctor at his father's clinic, Ariana. She was a very modern girl. She believed that desires should never be restrained, and if you want something, it should not be embarrassed. The family also had its own views, which she defended and always said that children prefer daddies. At first, John was shocked by such frankness. He would not have been able to, then got used to it, and even some of her bold judgments shared. Their romance grew hotter by the day. The weather was hot, and so was their relationship. They met at her place, but in motels, the places were different, but Ariana was always irresistible. She took her work much more seriously than her relationships with the opposite sex. She was a head nurse with 15 nurses under her command, each of whom knew their duties by heart and performed them professionally, knowing that Ariana was not to be trifled with. Being a strict boss, she believed that in the clinic there was no other way. For this, she was very respected by her father. As a lover, Ariana was very good. Sex for her was a fun adventure, and she always had a lot of fun. John never knew what she would be like today, much less tomorrow. When he thought of her, he always thought of sex, because it was inseparable. But he would never take her as his wife, thinking that married life wasn't for her, too boring. But Ariana longed to have him around. She saw John as a reliable man, a wonderful husband, and maybe even the father of her children. Time passed, but he did not offer anything, and once clarified noisily relations, the woman realized that he did not need him as a wife. He remembered Ariana's face at that moment. It was pale and angry. She looked at him and waited for a direct answer. "I need to hear from you why we are still not married." "I can't marry you." He heard his voice from outside, and he couldn't believe he could say that to her. She looked at him with interest. "May I know why?" He was ready to confess that he did not love her and had never loved her, but that, in his opinion, was too cruel and unfair to her. She was good in looks, and as a lover, she had everything going for her. But he just didn't love her, and that said it all. "We would never be happy." She stared at him, catching every word, then stood up abruptly, said goodbye, and left. She found the strength to quit the next day and take a job at another clinic. She broke up with John immediately and completely. She didn't cut off the tail piece by piece. That was her style. Both parting was not easy, but if there is no future in the relationship, why drag it out? That's when he met Alice, who was the complete opposite of Ariana. The second time he saw her 2 weeks later and also offered her a ride. They met like old friends and chatted the whole way. This time, the new acquaintance asked permission to call, and Alice left her phone number. That's how they began building a relationship that turned a year old in the summer. Alyssa's mom, Megan, asked her daughter to bring John to visit them. Parents should know who their only daughter was dating and spending all her free time with. "Mom, what's this for? Are we getting married? What are you doing? Why can't Dad and I meet the man our daughter likes?" "Because it's still only a man. When he proposes to me, you will become my fiancé? Then I'll bring him to meet. If you meet him now, he won't become a fiancé, given your attitude towards him. So leave her alone. She's saying all the right things." "Thanks, Daddy. You're just in time as always." Daddy wasn't much of a talker. He'd enter into a conversation as a last resort, but he always had the last word. Mom, waving her hand, went to the kitchen, and Alice began to get ready to go to her place to celebrate with her favorite person her small anniversary, a year since the day of their acquaintance. Alice and John's relationship was on an upward trend. They were happy together. The small room became their first home, cozy, warm. It is the merit of Alice, who tried to make her man rush here to her. Joan several times offered to rent another, more comfortable apartment, but Alice did not agree. Here she felt like a mistress, and in the new place that John wanted to rent, she would not have such a feeling. She valued her independence. Their relationship was already in its third year, but she was always waiting for some surprises, troubles, and they never came. She slowly began to calm down and forget about her fears. One day while walking in the park, Alice noticed, "John, do you remember how small these trees were when we walked here for the first time?" "Yes, I remember, and the alley has grown bigger. The trees have grown so big. Look up, the foliage is so thick, and the light barely shines through." 2.5 years is a long time. Isn't it too soon to talk about getting married? You're in your last year of college. You'll graduate in a heartbeat. Yes, I agree with you there. But you don't say anything about love. It's as if you don't have the words to express your feelings for me. No, Alice, I take them too seriously. That's why I don't throw them away, or they'll lose their value. It takes a few seconds to say, "I love you," and a lifetime to say, "I love you." That's what I'll do when we're married. He drew her to him and lifted her slightly, their faces facing each other. "I love you, darling, and I want to live my whole life with you. I want to have children with you that I'll love." He barely touched her lips, so gently, carefully. I love you too, and I want to live with you all my life, to have children by you whom I will adore. Let's make a deal. As soon as I pass the winter session, we'll go to meet my parents and apply, and after the summer session, we'll celebrate the wedding and go away for a week. What do you think of my plan? It's okay, but I'd move it up 6 months. My parents are wondering how long I've been in a relationship with you, and they want to see this magician who manages to keep me in suspense all this time. He was going to stay at her place tonight, but a call from his mom changed his plans. Alice, I'm sorry, I have to go. There's something at home. I'll go check it out. If it's okay, I'll come back. But there was no coming back. When he entered the apartment, he saw Anna on the floor. She could not get up. Something was with her leg. It was good that the phone was in his pocket, or she would not have been able to call. After fixing her leg with improvised means, her son called an ambulance. She was immediately x-rayed, which showed a fracture, but not of the femoral neck, as John had feared. They gave her a painkiller shot, a cast, and left her in the hospital. We'll keep her for a couple of days, and if she has no fever, we'll let her go. He drove home and only now felt tired. As he drove past a huge shopping center, he saw a girl fighting off 3 teenagers who were trying to take away her bag. The shopping bags were lying on the pavement, and she could barely manage them. The tallest one hit her, and she fell. He bent down to take the bag off her shoulder, but a man was running towards the girl, who turned out to be Ariana. John, having parked his car, also rushed to her aid. He grabbed the man who had hit the girl by the scruff of the neck and called the police. Ariana had a black eye, was crying, picking up her bags, and asked John to take her home. You don't have a car? Yeah, I took it to the service this morning. I noticed them downtown, so I put the bag over my shoulder so it'd be harder to take it off. And when I came out, they came at me like that. The gang didn't expect that I didn't give up so easily, she said, smiling. After powdering the bruise a little, she put on her glasses. I'll have to wear them for a couple weeks now, the bastards. John drove her home and helped her up to the apartment so that she knew nothing would happen to her. He refused the wine, but had a cup of tea. Well, can I give you my new phone number? Time has passed, we've calmed down, maybe we'll stay friends. And why not? We'll congratulate each other on birthdays, and maybe even the new year. Taking his any red wine with him, Ariana closed the door behind John. He was a good-looking man, she mentally noted, and regretted that she had given up so unforgivably quickly, giving him to some strange woman. John did not go to Alice. After such a busy day, wanted to take a shower and go to bed. But Anna had to stay in the hospital for almost a month. High fever and pressure did not allow her to be discharged home. Her son came to her mother's house in the morning, brought everything she had asked for since the evening, and Victor visited her after work. John didn't see Alice much. He couldn't even spend the night at her place. He had 2 or 3 surgeries a day, which was very exhausting. Sometimes he had to visit his mother in the evening. His father couldn't always make it. One night he got a call from Ariana. Hi, how are you? I'm fine. How are your bruises? They're not gone yet, but they're going away. Can you give me a ride? No, Ariana, I can't. Why not? We agreed that we're friends, and you can't say no to friends. Sometimes I can. I'm at my mom's in the hospital, so call a cab. And anticipating her question, I said, I won't be back for a while. Say hello to Anna. Let her get well. You take care of yourself too. I'll do my best. Ariana's voice sounded sad. For some reason, she didn't believe John's words about the hospital and called his home phone number. But no one answered. But that didn't convince her either, so she called her father at the hospital. Dad, hello. Do you know what's going on with Victor's wife? She's in the hospital. She fell and broke her leg. Why are you so interested all of a sudden? No, I'm fine, thanks. So it's not that bad. His refusal is not to get rid of her, but to take care of her mother, Ariana thought, raising her hand to stop the cab. Heading home, John decided to call Alice. How are you, my love? Where are you now? I had to work late today. I'm just getting off. I'll pick you up. I missed you. Well, good. I'll be glad to see you too. She was already standing there waiting for him. John got out of the car and hugged Alice. He squeezed her tighter and tighter, wanting to feel her all over. John, people are watching. Let's go to Mary's. How beautiful you are, darling. He leaned down and kissed her. The girl, too, was full of tenderness. She longed for their meetings, which had become quite rare. They talked the whole evening and did not notice how the night crept up. Now, as she slept on his shoulder and he drove her home, he believed that they would have a beautiful family and children. The car stopped outside the driveway and Alice was asleep. He waited a little while and slowly began to wake her up. She opened her eyes, not realizing where she was, but quickly remembered and apologized for falling asleep. "Why don't you stay at my place? It's been so long since we've been together." "Of course, I wanted to stay, but I can see how tired you are. You go ahead. I'll get my stuff out of the car and catch up with you." Taking things from the back seat, he stumbled over a powder bottle, put it in his pocket, thinking it was Alice's. Slamming the car doors shut, he ran to catch up with the girl. "Alice, you left it in the car," John said, holding it out to her. Her look was first surprised, then confused, and then, gathering courage, she asked, "Are you deceiving me?" "In what way?" "Directly. It's not my thing. I can't afford to buy brand-name French cosmetics yet. They don't pay paralegals enough, you know." "Alice, wait. What are you accusing me of?" "Nothing yet. But if you tell me the truth, I'll decide for myself whether or not to charge you with anything." "Tell me." "Come on." "Alice, I don't like your tone. Think about it. If I had another man's woman in my car, would I?" And then he remembered that a few days ago, Ariana was sitting there. "Oh, God, I remembered. My ex-colleague Ariana was sitting there. Sit down, I'll tell you all about it." After listening to his explanation, the girl said, "In our lives, we often have people from the past, former friends or girlfriends." Did not think about why she suddenly appeared. "I think you should not expect anything good from a person who was not around for so long." "No, Alice, it's a coincidence. If I'd gone the other way, I might not have seen her for as long." She nodded, not sure if he really believed what he was saying, although John was very convincing. This time it ended well. Alice lay in his arms and thought she was perfectly happy. He felt good with her too. He enjoyed the smell of her soft body and the sheen of her silky hair. He liked everything about her. "Do you believe me? No more hard feelings?" No, I'm sorry. I was afraid I'd already lost you." "I'm sorry I doubted you. I love you very much, that's all." "I love you too. Let's trust each other." "I agree." It was about 4:00 a.m. when they finally fell asleep. They both didn't hear the alarm clock, jumped up and got dressed in 15 minutes and left the house. A few days later, John received another call from Ariana. "Listen, I didn't leave a powder bottle in your car. I searched everything. Then I remembered that after that incident at the shopping center, I powdered my bruise in the car." "Yeah, I left it in the car. I found it in the backseat. I'm having a hard day today, so come to the clinic by the end of the day. I'll give it back to Marion." When John gave Ariana the powder bottle, he asked her not to leave her things in his car. "Or what?" she asked defiantly. "Because that little thing almost ruined my life." Can you imagine? A powder bottle. After that, I realized how fragile relationships are. How easy it is to break the harmony. All it takes is a bad word or some powder. What am I hearing? Is John really that serious? Is he going to get married? Ariana asked, afraid to hear the answer. Yes, he is. He's met a trustworthy, kind man, and he has no intention of losing her. That's a strong claim. So you've settled down and decided to become a family man. Yes, it's time. Ariana left upset. She couldn't believe Bogdanov was getting married. She wanted to destroy everything in her way, but not to let John realize his plan. Of course, if they were for real, it was unlikely she would be able to destroy those feelings. Sooner or later, she might pay for her own actions. But that wasn't stopping her at the moment. She wanted to see the lucky girl who had managed to seduce such a man. They met at that ill-fated shopping center when John rushed to Ariana's aid. The young people were getting ready for John's birthday. They bought groceries, champagne, and on their way out of the store, they ran into Ariana. What a reunion, Ariana said too loudly. Janushka, happy birthday to you, and she reached out to touch his cheek. Thank you for not forgetting. How could I? Ariana said, clapping him on the shoulder. Glancing at his companion, she saw fear in her eyes. Fear of losing the man she was clinging to so frantically. Fear of being abandoned. Alice saw in this beautiful, bold woman a rival whom, before she had even begun, she was already afraid to fight. She saw her as a confident woman of the highest quality. And Ariana realized that this hen was not worthy of a man like John. This woman will not fight for her happiness. too proud, too jealous, doesn't feel her worth, and therefore also stupid. I'll win this fight, she thought, and grinned wryly. It was good to see you, and waving goodbye, went into the store. Alice was scared, but she didn't show it. Alice, this is the Ariana who left her powder bottle in my car. Yeah, I get it. A very beautiful, confident woman, said the girl with envy in her voice. She acted as if you two were very close at some point. Am I right? And that's where he got cold feet. He could not tell the truth. He realized that his beloved Alice will speculate what and how it was between them, and he, following the proverb, lie to save, answered, no, there was no relationship. We are former colleagues. Our fathers worked together and have been friends for a long time. His voice was calm, affectionate. She smiled and nodded. It was hard for her to speak, to think that what he said wasn't true. She was afraid to imagine her life without John. He sensed that the meeting with Ariana hadn't been good for her, so he offered to go to her place and have dinner with her. But to his surprise, she flatly refused, citing a sudden headache and a desire to be alone. All right, let me. Don't. I'll get there on my own. Don't worry, I'll be fine soon, she replied and stopped the cab. She couldn't sleep, staring at her computer, drinking coffee constantly, and only stopped when she felt her heart jumping out. She found a picture of Ariana at that clinic where John worked. She looked at every feature of her face, and there was nothing to pick on. She was very beautiful. And she couldn't believe John's words that nothing had happened between them. It was hard for her to imagine how she could pass by such a beauty. And the more she looked at her, the worse she felt. She looked awful, with a mournful expression on her face, as if she had buried her nearest and dearest, and a bottomless grief in her eyes. No, I can't do this, she said to herself. This will accomplish nothing. What will be, will be. She had to get over the fear of being abandoned. She had once read that life was a game where the rules stated that anything could happen. That's exactly what she meant. And sure, I can get dumped. But I don't have to leave myself. Because life doesn't end here. There'll be another John or Carl or whoever, but you have to love yourself and stop worrying so much, because I was scared just by Ariana's look, and I hurt John for some reason. After taking a cold shower, she came to herself, put on a warm robe, and as soon as her head touched the pillow, she fell asleep. Alice was approaching the winter session, and with it John's birthday. She was even afraid to admit to herself that she was more afraid of meeting his parents than of exams. So, tomorrow John would turn 27, a man in the prime of his life. He's handsome, he's a great professional, and I think he loves me. Again this insecurity mentally scolded herself, Alice. She bought him a medal as a gift, on which engraved the words, "The best plastic surgeon of all time." Well, it's a joke gift, decided the girl. She also bought him a player for listening to music while jogging. All this was beautifully packaged, and at the appointed time, she rang the doorbell. Victor opened the door. "Are you Alice?" he asked, very friendly. "Yes, I am." The girl smiled strangely. "John gave us such a picture of you that it would be silly not to recognize you. Let me help you take off your coat. Come on in." She went into the living room, where a large, beautiful table was set. She noted to herself that there were more guests than she'd expected. "Hello, darling," John said loudly, which made her wince. "John, darling, I wish you a happy birthday. I love you," and handed her a box wrapped in shiny paper. The celebrant immediately opened it and laughed for a long time at the medal, immediately put it on himself, and showed everyone what he had achieved at work and how he was valued. The player was also to his liking. When everyone sat down at the table, the atmosphere lightened up a bit. Everyone joked and made toasts. Anna kept looking at the girl with an appraising look, then transferred her eyes to her son, who sat next to her, and lowered her dissatisfied gaze to her plate. When it was Alice's turn to make a toast, she was very nervous, but she started cheerfully. At that time, the doorbell rang. "Mom, I didn't invite anyone else." "Who is it?" "I think it's the Stones. How could I not invite them to a family reunion? I mean, we're practically related." The hallway became noisy with hugs and kisses. "Son, go meet the guests," Mom shouted. "Alice, I'm sorry, I'll be right back." In the hallway, he saw the entire Stoner family, including Ariana. Alice was sitting alone at the table and felt unwanted by anyone, as if she wanted to be in her room and not see or hear anyone. At that time, the guests entered the room. When everyone was seated, John introduced Alice as his girlfriend. Mom grimaced, and only Dad smiled and began to fill the glasses with champagne. Alice's toast was safely forgotten, and they began to listen to the toasts of the guests. Ariana was the first to stand up. She had obviously prepared for the toast, and the gift she gave was with a big hint. The toast was great, with humor and wishes for happiness. She handed the birthday boy a small box containing a keychain in the shape of a Hippocratic bowl. It was quite an expensive thing, made of silver, which was confirmed by the hallmark on the back of the gift. "Where are your keys?" Ariana asked. "Look, not now," John said with irritation in his voice. "No, right now," and she went into the hallway. "Are these yours?" His, Ariana answered Anna. She quickly connected the keychain with John's keys, and only then she calmed down. A psychic friend had advised her to make such a gift. If you want to bind a man to yourself, then give him a keychain like yours. Identical trinkets will constantly keep two people in an energetic connection. She liked the idea, and when she saw a keychain that matched John's, she thought it was fate. Ariana went ahead and, to finish Alice off, asked John to dance. "Let's go and reminisce about our youth," Ariana said with a laugh. "I'm sorry, Ariana, but Alice asked me at the beginning of the evening, so I can't. There are so many gentlemen, you can invite anyone," and he pointed at the fathers, who were still so hot. "Son, dance with Ariana. Your girlfriend won't be offended." "Mom, let me decide," and turned to Alice and asked her to dance. But she didn't want to dance, saying that it's not nice to refuse a girl. John sat like a spitfire. Ariana waited for him to get up, and the man waited for Alice, who shook her head, refusing him. When he got up and went to dance with Ariana, everyone clapped. "What a beautiful couple." John's mom couldn't resist. "Yes, Anna, you're right," echoed Ariana's mom. While John danced, Alice got up and went into the hallway to get dressed. She had nothing else to do in this house. No one came out to see her, so she quietly closed the door and quickly ran down the stairs to the bottom. Tears rolled from her eyes down her cheeks along with her mascara. A cab stood outside the house as if waiting for her. Naming the address, she continued to cry. The roads were clear, and in 15 minutes she was home. Her clothes were lying on the floor. She stood under the shower and didn't hear John calling at her door. Then pounding on the door with his fist. She came out an hour later, completely exhausted, lay down and lay there until morning with her eyes open. No sooner had Alice put the kettle on to make coffee than the doorbell rang. She looked at the clock. It was not yet 8 o'clock. When she opened the door, she saw a tired man with a faded look. "And what was that yesterday?" he immediately asked, leaning against the jamb. "Good morning to you too, come in." "I'm not having a good morning. Can you explain to me what happened yesterday?" "What happened yesterday?" "Nothing, I guess. I just realized that I was an extra and left. Did anyone notice I was gone?" "Alice, you're acting like a child. Small, mean, petulant, resentful. I told you to spend the day together and get to know each other another day. You can't mix two events like that. One is fun, the other is serious, where there's no room for strangers. You wanted something different. Well, it is what it is. The Stones are old friends. Ariana's their daughter, and even though they weren't invited, they had a right to come. Do you understand?" "Of course I understand. I also understand something else, that Ariana is infatuated with you and will stop at nothing. I can't handle her. Do you understand that?" "You don't have to handle her. My dear girl, I had 1,000 opportunities to marry that pretty girl. But I never took them because I never loved her. I loved you. Why did you come after me when I left? If you say you love me." "I didn't notice at first, and when I asked where you were, Mom said she'd gone to powder her nose. I waited about 5 minutes, then I looked in the room and it was empty. I apologized to the guests and went to your place. I rang the bell and knocked, but you didn't answer. You came here?" "Yes, I did." After that, Alice felt better and even a little ashamed of yesterday. She had really acted like a rude person, abandoning a man on his birthday and showing the guests that he meant nothing to her. It's bad and, above all, untrue. She loved him and was terribly jealous, even though the man never gave her a reason. "I'm sorry. Yes, I did a bad thing, but no one paid attention to me. They wouldn't even listen to my toast." "Alice, but it was my birthday. That's why they were paying attention to me. You noticed they gave me presents too. Wasn't my attention enough for you? You're a child, you should grow up." "Did you like Ariana's present?" "Yeah, it was great. It's very original, but yours was just as good. Everyone tried your metal on and said it was a great idea. It's a pity you didn't see it." They were drinking coffee and she was crying quietly. He put his arm around her and gently wiped away her tears. She put her hand on his shoulder and said, "I'm sorry. I spoiled your holiday, but I was so confused. You dancing with such a beautiful woman and your mother admiring you so much. I felt superfluous. I'm sorry, darling. Who told me it was okay to say no to girls who didn't want to go dancing with me? That girl Alice. You understand, I can't even imagine that you're not with me, that you're not making coffee for me and lying on my shoulder. Alice, I love you. You and I agreed to trust each other once. I remember, but Ariana is so unpredictable and beautiful. You're beautiful too, very beautiful, and forget about Ariana. So your mom didn't like me? I thought when she looked at me, she felt sorry for her son, that such a handsome boy got such a me. Look, this isn't funny anymore. You're a broken record. Why is your self-esteem so low? You're smart, you're beautiful, I adore you." That's when John's cell phone started ringing. "John, didn't you forget you got a surgery in 40 minutes? "No, Nanachka, I'm on my way. Why are your eyes so wide open?" The man asked Alice. "This is my nurse, reminded about the operation, and stop flinching at every call. Okay, have a nice day. After work, I'll come over to your place. What can I buy you?" "Buy some good wine, I'll cook the meat." She didn't want to let him go, but she felt that he was no longer with her, but out there with his patients. So she let go of the best plastic surgeon of all time. When John rang the doorbell, Alice had everything ready. She wanted to make it up to her lover, so she decided that it would be not just a dinner, but a beautiful romantic dinner. All its attributes were on her face. She favored white. Rose petals on the white tablecloth looked even brighter, and tall candlesticks with twisted candles decorated the table. She wanted John to relax, rest after work, and plunge into the warm atmosphere she was preparing for him. When she opened the door, she didn't see John behind the huge bouquet and packages with which he literally piled into the apartment. "How beautiful you are! Today more than ever." Taking the bouquet from John's hands, she placed it in a vase on the edge of the table, as if to complete the table setting. Today was her day. The meat was excellent, she looked beautiful, and the atmosphere she had created was one of love. "How good I feel with you," said Alice. "I don't want this evening to end. If it were possible to make it so that only you and I were in the whole world, no Ariana or Manachka or anyone else, we'd be fine. Alice, what do you care about Ariana? Forget about her like she never existed. I envy her assertive nature. It's more suited to a man than a fragile and beautiful woman like her. That's where you're wrong. She has her mom's personality. She's a very determined woman, and Ariana's like her. Veronica, Ariana's mom likes to tell how she married Pavel Ivanovich. Really? Did she? He doesn't like to tell the story, but Veronica loves it. I think she's adding things to the story that didn't really happen. But I know that Uncle Dustin liked Veronica and her girlfriend. The three of them always went out together. But one day, Veronica overheard Dustin talking to a friend, sharing that he liked both girls and couldn't decide which one to choose. When Veronica heard this, she realized this was her chance. On Saturday morning, she came to him, told him to take his passport, and dragged him to the registry office. He did not resist, and even was pleased that finally it will be put to an end. A friend, when she found out, was very upset, and at the wedding to them did not come, and after graduating from the institute left the city. She was never seen again. That's how her parents' passions boiled over. That's an interesting story. Ariana, knowing this story, will follow in her mom's footsteps. I can't listen to this anymore. He stood up, pretending to leave. Isn't there anything else to talk about but Ariana? Well, sit down, calm down. I won't talk about her anymore. The rest of the evening passed quietly. They danced, confessed their love to each other, and dreamed of their life after the wedding. They decided that they would hardly live in luxury, but they would be well provided for. John had promised to take care of that. They would never have to worry about tomorrow, or worse, think about how to make ends meet. A man, as the head of the household, will try to make his family's life prosperous. Alice's evening was wonderful. Even in the dream it continued. They agreed to go to the registry office tomorrow. John offered to go to Alice's parents first, and then to the registry office, but the girl insisted on her own, knowing how her mother feels about John. All the next day, Alice looked at the clock, but the hands were frozen in place and did not want to move to 3 o'clock, the time when John would be waiting for her at the clinic to go to the registry office. She even put the clock to her ear, checking whether it was running or not. The watch was in good working order and the time was correct. She was just nervous, and she could understand it. It wasn't every day you applied for a job. The cab took her to the clinic very quickly. Looking at the time, she realized that she had arrived half an hour early. She wanted to get out of the car and walk around, but she saw Ariana and John coming out of the clinic. She closed the doors and asked the cab driver to wait a little longer and reassured him that she would pay for the downtime. She was pounding so badly that the driver turned on the heater when he heard her teeth chattering. She saw Ariana trying to hug John, and he pulled her arms away and said something to her. She wanted so badly to hear what this woman was talking about so emotionally. "John, let's talk like adults. You don't pick up the phone when I call you. You refuse to go out for a cup of coffee. You've forgotten that we're friends and friends should see each other once in a while. Do you agree with me?" "I do, as long as it doesn't interfere with personal plans. You don't want to hear anything when I tell you I'm going to see Alice. Tell me what you see in that plucked chicken." "Don't you talk about my future wife like that," John said loudly and grabbed her by the shoulders. Alice clenched her eyes shut and was afraid to open them. "Why are you sitting there?" the cab driver asked her. "Are they kissing?" Without opening her eyes, the girl asked. The cab driver looked at Alice and realized that she was afraid to look at all this. "No, they're hugging. I can't look at this anymore. Take me home." John was actually pulling away from Ariana's hands and trying to leave, but she was trying to stop him. "Ariana, leave me alone. Don't make me talk to you rudely. You've meant nothing to me for a long time." Everything, and he pushed her away. "Then I'll tell your chicken about our hot nights. She's probably never dreamed of anything like this. Please go ahead. I don't know what you'll get out of it. I'm not coming back to you anyway." He looked at the time. Alice should have been here by now, but she was late. The call from John made her flinch. She hesitated for a long time whether to answer or not, but her hands were shaking so much that she disconnected the call. "Maybe you overreacted, deciding to leave so soon. We should have talked." "What's there to talk about? It's clear enough." "From what I saw, nothing was clear to me," the cabbie said. "Man, they'd be happy. All the way home." She sat staring at one point. The cab driver, a man in his 50s, looked at her in the mirror and finally couldn't take it anymore. "I'm sorry, but did you do the wrong thing? I have 2 daughters myself, and I would not approve of such behavior. Why did you come out? It was obvious that the guy didn't like it with this girl. Maybe he was waiting for you to come to his aid, and you cowardly ran away from the battlefield. You don't know anything. She loves him and she's pursuing him by any means possible. Why should I get in the way? Let her pursue him. It's who he loves that counts. You know, I like that woman better than you. Fighting for her place in the sun, and you? Snot on your fist. You're beautiful. You need to be confident. No, what you did was wrong. Let him come back if he loves you. It's not the first time you've jumped up. He'll get tired of it. Let him. I won't be lost without him." "That's a good attitude, but you love him, don't you? And the guy's handsome. He's a doctor." "Yeah, he's a plastic surgeon. Makes women beautiful. You see how many women are around, and he loves you. You should appreciate that. Why don't we go back?" No, I don't want to see him." The car stopped at the entrance, and the girl asked to wait for 10 minutes. She quickly packed a huge suitcase with her things, removed the photos from the walls, took her favorite knickknacks. She once again looked around the room where she was so happy with John and closed the door of the apartment, knocked on the neighbor. "Catherine, here are the keys. Give them to my landlady. Here's the money for the whole month. Tell her I've vacated the apartment." "Why are you so suddenly out of your seat? Where are you going?" "To my mom's for now, I guess, and then we'll see. Goodbye." She loaded everything into Mary's car and gave her parents' address. John, not understanding anything, waited for Alice for another 20 minutes and went to her house. Called, knocked, until a neighbor came out and said that Alice no longer lived here. "What do you mean? She doesn't live here anymore. Where is she now?" "I have no idea. She packed up and left in a cab in 15 minutes. I don't understand. Yesterday I was in one mood, today I'm in another. I'm sorry, I'm talking to myself." He went outside in total confusion. The man was a little tired of Alice's antics, but his love for this girl made him forgive. If she had moved out so suddenly, it meant that she had not had time to find another apartment, which meant that she could only go to her parents. Quickly getting into Maria's car, he stopped already in front of a familiar house. Passing the cab, which was pulling away from the entrance, he began to remember the number of the apartment, but remembered only the floor. "I'll have to wait for someone to get in or out, or I won't be able to get in," John reasoned. He sat down at the entrance and waited. His head hurt and his mood was low. Ariana was just boring the hell out of him. Turns out she had called him all night yesterday, but he was so happy with Alice that he hadn't heard any calls. That's why she made this spectacle of herself today. The door to the entryway opened abruptly and kids spilled out. He went up to the right floor and immediately remembered the apartment. No one answered the door for a long time, and he was about to leave when the door opened and Alice's mom, Megan, appeared before him in all her glory. "Young man, haven't they taught you any manners? If they don't open the door after 3 tries, they don't want to see you. Didn't you know that?" "Of course I knew that, but I'm not in the mood for sentimentality right now. Could you get Alice for me, please?" The woman made a surprised face. Her neatly plucked eyebrows went up, and she confidently answered that her daughter had not lived with them for a long time and gave the address of her rented apartment. "I've been there. The neighbor told me that she's moved out, and she has nowhere else to go but you. I see you're good with analytics, but we don't have it. Is there anything I can give her later?" John stared into the woman's eyes, almost believing her, apologized and asked that Alice call him. "I will definitely tell her, and if she wants to, of course she'll call," and slammed the door loudly. Alice heard the whole conversation between her mother and John, but never dared to go out. She thought it was his fault that Ariana was letting herself do this. If he answered her seriously, maybe even rudely, she would definitely back off. John drove home and thought about Alice. She was different from all the women he'd had before her. They were always ready to get into bed with him at will, just to stay among his girlfriends. To befriend a plastic surgeon was prestigious. But Alice was not the same. Her naivety, honesty, and keen sense of justice appealed to him. Maybe they were both wrong. He couldn't get over the reason why she hadn't come to the registry office. She couldn't have fallen out of love with him and changed her mind in a matter of hours. His anxiety was transmitted to the girl. She, too, was questioning the way she had acted. She was hurt that even the cabbie liked Ariana better. But at times like this, you forget everything you've heard, try to run away from your problems, bury your head in the sand, and behave foolishly, and when you're angry and frightened, you make one mistake after another. John tried to call her several times, but to no avail. She had thrown away her SIM card on the way to her parents' house, so she wouldn't hear his voice. John didn't give up hope of finding Alice. If she didn't want to see him again, he wouldn't impose. But he wanted to know what had happened in the 5 hours they hadn't seen each other. Why had the girl's mood changed so abruptly to decide such a serious matter as marriage? There must be very good reasons for this. He wanted to know only them. The first thing he did was to go to Alice at work, where he learned that she had quit yesterday suddenly and asked permission not to work for 2 weeks, and in her application she wrote, "for family reasons." He spent the whole evening at home looking at the ceiling and wondering what he should do next. Ariana came to support him. When he could hardly tear his eyes away from the ceiling, as from a beautiful painting, he looked at the girl. "I'm begging you, go away or I'll push you out of here. Come on, we're going to the coolest club in the world. It's gonna be a hell of a program. I'm staying home." "No, honey, that's not possible. They're waiting for us there. Tell everyone I have a headache or I'm dying." He smiled strangely and asked her to leave. "I'll come to you tomorrow, however you want me to." The next day, he still had to go with Ariana to a mutual friend's anniversary party. He felt awful. He didn't know when it would all end, because they just wouldn't let him go before. It was like a detention where he had to smile and drink champagne, even though he would have gladly had a glass of pure water. He longed for Christine surrounded by these people who were strangers to him. How can you be bored when so many people want to cheer you up? "I'm sorry, I'm not ready to party. I want to be alone to clear my head. Don't hold me back. Thank you for your efforts, but don't come to my place again." But she wouldn't even listen to him, much less understand. "You shouldn't be alone right now. Don't bother me. I'll decide what to do." And he left that house he hated. She didn't have time to get into his Mariana. He drove off before she could open the car door. Ariana was furious at his behavior, but there was nothing she could do. She had a relationship with Anna, but even that support from her mom couldn't help Ariana get the man's attention. "I'm sorry," she replied to his mom. I can't help you anymore. He seems to really love her and I'm powerless, even with my pressure. What am I hearing? Are you giving up? No way. Yeah, that's it. I realized I missed my chance and I shouldn't bother him anymore. I'm truly sorry, girl. I wanted you to be a part of our family. I know, Anna, but apparently your wishes and mine aren't enough. John could only do one operation a day. His father did the rest, though it was hard for him to stand at the operating table for 2 hours at a time. Son, I can't take this much longer. My back hurts, so get out of your depression and get to work. I got it, Dad. Everything's gonna be okay. One day, he finally saw her. Alice had her back to him, but even at that distance, he still recognized her. His heart was beating so fast, he was ready to jump out of his chest. He was ready to run to her and hug her tightly and not let her go anywhere else. But the running was like a slow-motion movie, and the more he tried, the slower he got. He was getting close. She was so beautiful. Alice turned around, smiled her smile, and he woke up. Even though it was a dream, he was still happy that he had seen her that way. He thought about who could help him in his search for Alice and remembered his school friend, with whom they ran away from classes together and played on the same soccer team. Only now Steve had his own detective agency. Quickly dialing his number, he offered to meet and talk. After hearing his friend's story, Steve promised to help, and the next day he took on the case. A week later, he was able to report to John that Alice was out of town. He suggested waiting a couple of weeks. Maybe she had gone on vacation. Then he would be able to say exactly where she was. Meanwhile, he went to the institute, where he learned very interesting details. It turned out that Alice transferred to a branch of the law university. Steve found out in which city it is located and went there. Documents she really turned in, but where she lives, no one knew. At the police station, after showing the documents, he asked for help. He was promised help and went home with a light heart. A week later, a policeman called Steve and said that Alice had registered at her aunt's house, but did not live there. That aunt doesn't know where she is. What aunt? John said in surprise. She never told us about her. Well, let's wait until the last session at the institute. She'll definitely come there and we can talk to her. But for now, I'll be patient. I've lost my job. I've blamed everything on my dad. I've got to stop suffering. I like your attitude. And remember, everything will come true if you don't want it to. The words of the great Renevskaya. You can trust her. Got it. He's been tormented by his parents, saying that it's high time to come to his senses and start looking for a good girl because he's about to turn 28. You don't think it's that easy, darling. You've had so many of them, and only this gray mouse caught your eye. You should give Ariana another chance. She loves you so much. I don't love her, and I never have, John said angrily. How long can you chase a ghost, this illusory happiness? You mustn't go into a panic, as if your favorite toy had been taken away from you, and you become a weak boy without it. And they also say that women are weaker than men. Now I see that it's men who have a harder and more painful time breaking up with girls. I don't like you like that at all. It's time to get back to life. He himself understood everything and tried to occupy himself with work, not to think about Alice. And it was saving him. John's life was getting better. He was surrounded by so many women he hadn't really noticed before. The news that the handsome John became free quickly traveled all those who wanted to comfort such a man. But he was not ready for a new relationship, not having completed the old one. The man did not give up trying to find Alice and talk. But days and months passed. To remember her features, he closed his eyes and remembered their meetings, walks, their nights. It was all so fresh in his memory. For the entire next 6 months, he wandered the streets alone, especially the places where they had been together. Toward the beginning of the last session, John drove himself to a branch of the law school, but what he heard killed him. Alice had passed early. And the diploma? Did she get her diploma? No, but she had her diploma notarized by her aunt, Victoria. Did I answer your question? Yes, thank you. Like a trained detective, she anticipated his moves and was proactive. She's running away from him as if he'd done something irreparable, and she doesn't want to see him. Well, then he'll end his search and start his life over, but without Alice. He felt how tired he was of all these searches, of waiting for something that would help him relieve the guilt of their separation. A year passed. John was still alone, but his heart did not beat so often at the memories of a year ago. Alice was no easier. She was staying with her aunt, her father's sister. She was a quiet, kind woman who had buried her husband long ago and lived alone in her 2-room apartment. The arrival of her niece made Victoria very happy. She hoped that her arrival would distract her from her gloomy thoughts. When her niece told her that she was pregnant, she took care of her like a fragile crystal vase. Alice learned that she was not alone a month after her escape from John. It was on that romantic night. Fate had decided so, apparently, knowing in advance that this night would be the last. Her conscience tormented her, because it was John's child and he, as a father, had a right to know about it. But Megan insisted on an abortion. "You don't want this baby, have an abortion. You're still young enough to have children." The situation was saved, as always, by Harry. He rarely interfered in the conversation between mother and daughter, only in exceptional cases. This conversation he did not like, and the word abortion, in general, a terrible word, and he opened the door of the daughter's room sharply and said loudly, "When will this end? How long are you going to dictate what this grown woman should do? How do you know if she wants this child or not? What right do you have to push her to kill a child? I'm a mother and I know what my child needs. A child may be better, but not a grown woman who decided to become a mother so that I'll never hear that dreaded word abortion again. And you, my daughter, if you want to carry this child and it's dear to you, go to Victoria. You'll be at ease there. She'll look after you and help you with everything. I see that some people here have taken on the role of a doomsayer." He glared angrily at his wife. Megan pressed her thin lips together, but she wanted her word to be the last. "Think about it. A mother would never wish ill. Or do you still love him and want to have a child of that miracle surgeon's reproach in front of your eyes for the rest of your life?" "Yes, I love him and I'll always love him, but he doesn't need me. I'm not ready for such a man. I will go to my aunt. I love her very much," Alice cried and said. On his 28th birthday, John left the city not to receive guests and congratulations. He didn't want to hear the same words spoken year after year. Anna, of course, was upset. She wanted to gather in a large company, to talk, to see her son happy. But it was not destined to come true. The son was adamant. He, in general, after the breakup of relations with Alice, became tougher, and she even seemed rude. The mother thought it was the cost of the unwanted friendship her son had made. Alice couldn't deny herself the urge to wish John a happy birthday. The message was short. She wished him happiness. Looking at the text message, he realized it was Alice, but the number was undetectable. He noticed that he didn't get excited. His heart didn't pound like before. Time had done its work. They were becoming strangers. He didn't even realize that he had become the father of a beautiful daughter, whom her mother had named Anna. Anna, it sounded beautiful, melodic, she thought. Aunt Coraline was her helper in everything. What would she do without her? John was slowly getting over his failed relationship with Alice, and she was getting herself worked up and wondering if she had done the right thing a year ago, and answering it herself. Of course it was right. It is necessary to calm down and live on. The young mother talked to herself, taking small sips of tea. 2 more years later, John got married. He was already 30, and he realized that if he didn't marry for a couple more years, he would never marry and his mother would never have grandchildren. The girl, who was 5 years younger than him and named Martha, was pretty. She worked as an instructor at a fitness center, and they met at a cafe where she stopped for a snack. John sat down at her table, and that's how their acquaintance began. Anna didn't like her. "Why you always find the wrong women?" "I like her. She loves me. She's smart. She's pretty. She takes care of me. That's all I need. She makes me feel at ease. She loves him. How can someone so handsome not love you? And you? Do you love her? Or don't you care who you marry? What are you talking about? How can it be indifferent? I choose a wife for life." "That's right, for life. Will you put up with a smart, pretty one for life? Or is that not enough for married life?" "Mom, it's okay. We've been holding hands for a year and a half. How long?" "They're holding hands. I know how young girls today have pens. She's not pregnant." "Not yet, but we're working on it." "Now you're talking about holding hands." He laughed at his perceptive mother and was surprised at his own laughter. It had been a long time since he laughed so heartily. The wedding was beautiful. The bride in her lace gown, no other than couture, was marvelous. The whole female half of the fitness center envied Martha and did not understand what this handsome plastic surgeon found in this Martha. A small butt and breasts, so bad, but the face smarmy. That's all her virtues. She's a bit of a roughneck. But somehow she became John's wife. Alice found out about John's wedding on the internet. That's it. She scrutinized Martha's features, looked at her gorgeous dress, but most of all, she looked at John. "So, Anna, your dad got married." "Yes, he did." "Well, you and I are fine together, aren't we? You're my beautiful girl." That night, she couldn't sleep a wink. She kept picturing John and that Martha together. Then she imagined herself in a white dress next to John. She didn't fall asleep until morning. The only question on her mind was, why not Ariana? She had run away from him so that John would be happy with her. What could have happened? Alice thought, was John really telling her the truth when he convinced her that he had never loved Ariana? She covered her face with the palms of her hands, but she didn't cry. What if my sacrifices were in vain and no one wanted me? After the wedding, the young couple traveled to Europe. That's where they spent their honeymoon week. Martha immediately said she didn't want children yet. "I just started to live, so I should give birth and stay at home with diapers and cradles." "No, I don't want to do that, and don't let your mom tell me what I should and shouldn't do all the time." John noted to himself that his wife was no Alice. He even before the wedding bought an apartment and managed to make repairs there, but it was empty and uncomfortable. Therefore, after a week's vacation, the young couple had one more pleasant event, moving into a new dwelling. It was a large and bright apartment, as on the 20th floor. Martha had never had her own place. She was traveling on rented apartments, and now such a luxury. What a pleasant hassle it is to buy furniture, curtains, dishes, but also to live through the first mismatch of tastes. With Martha's temperament, it was bound to be as she would say, but John stopped her at once. "I like that you're zealous in your endeavor. But don't forget, I'm going to live there too, and you'll have to consider my wishes too." He said it quietly, but so plainly that Martha was afraid that their married life might end before it began. "You're right, darling. I got a little carried away and quickly smoothed over my spouse's conflict. It's good that you understood everything, because I don't like to repeat myself twice." She looked at her husband and thought that he is not as simple as it may seem at first glance. It was evening. John and his wife sat on the loggia and looked at the first appearing stars in the huge city. They could see everything from the 20th floor. Cars whizzed by and people seemed so small. It was as if the city was waking up after a hot day. The coolness invited everyone to relax and enjoy the beautiful evening. "What a nice breeze is blowing," Martha said, sipping her glass of red wine. "It's a wonderful summer this year." John replied, "What did you do all day today?" He asked his wife, who had given up work and was all about herself. "In the morning I went to the girls to the fitness center, then went to the hairdresser, went shopping and was so tired that I decided to take a bath and relax. Maybe we could go out. A club, maybe, and listen to some music. Our lives are so boring." "I'm not bored at all. I had 3 surgeries today. I've been at the table for 6 hours. That's why I don't feel like going to any club." "You're just saying that to rub my nose in the fact that I don't work and I'm living off you." "Not at all. I asked you not to work. You said yes. So be my guest. But you and I must understand that I'm not sitting in the clinic. I'm working, and I'm working hard. So don't take offense. If I don't work, we won't have the standard of living we're used to. You don't have to work. The clinic is yours. Hire 1 or 2 more surgeons, and you and I will vacation abroad." John looked at his wife and thought how bored he was with her, but he said aloud, "I'll think about your proposal. I'll lie down in my office tonight." "Yes, please. You're used to sleeping with me. If your mom knew that, she wouldn't be asking me about grandchildren all the time. He's too tired to make love to her." "You think I don't know you're on birth control pills? Who are you kidding? I want a family. I'm 35, you're 30. Mature enough to have kids. 5 years of married life was long enough for you to enjoy life for yourself and have a baby." "Maybe it's not my fault we can't make it work," Martha said resentfully. "Are you saying I'm infertile?" "Well, let's get tested together. I don't see anything wrong with that. Tomorrow I'll wait for you at my clinic. We'll take all the tests required to answer this question. I'll do it myself, at the women's clinic." "No, you will come to my clinic. Got it?" "Got it." She already regretted saying it, but it's the same thing. "Why don't we go together tomorrow? You'll get up at 7 o'clock a.m. "I'll be up, don't worry," and she went into the bedroom. And John lay on the couch in his office and wondered why he lived. Work, 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 home and work again. Money, money. The house needs this, the house needs that. Everything is necessary and necessary. He doesn't want anything more, he's very tired. Maybe it would be really worth it if we could get at least one surgeon. He should consult his father, was the last thought that flashed through his mind before he fell into a deep sleep. Martha didn't get up at 7 o'clock, and he didn't want to wake her. Writing her a note to wait for her at the clinic, he quickly ran down the stairs, and with a squeal of tires, his car sped off. Martha didn't wake up until 9 o'clock. It took her only an hour to take the test. She was in such a hurry that she was late for work, but all she wanted to do was to get to the store where she had put aside a beautiful cloth yesterday. Today she had not forgotten her card, to which her husband transferred a tidy sum every month. Meanwhile, not far from John, his beautiful daughter was growing up. Alice was still alone. No, of course, she had men and felt that she liked, but as soon as it came to bed, she could not overcome herself. Nausea came to her throat, and she could not do anything about it. After several attempts, she left this idea to arrange a personal life. For the first time, she admitted to herself that John was her man, and it was only with him that she had known love and was at the pinnacle of bliss. Time was passing, and with it her beauty and youth. She decided that she would devote her life to her daughter and do everything to make her Anna happy for her and for herself. The older the girl grew, the more she looked like her father. Only her eyes were her mother's, but she looked just like John. At the age of 7, Anna asked for the first time where her daddy was. Alice had been waiting for this question for a long time and prepared for it. She decided not to turn the child against her father, and he really wasn't guilty of anything. For the first time after the question was asked, she showed his picture. "What a handsome daddy I have." With delight said the girl, "And you mommy is also very handsome, so I'll be beautiful too." "Yes, you are already beautiful," said the happy mom proudly. "Tell me about daddy," the daughter began to ask more and more often. "Your daddy is a very talented plastic surgeon." "What does that mean?" "It means he makes people beautiful. He's a very kind, decent man." "Mommy, if daddy's so good, why aren't you together?" "Here, my daughter, I have to tell you, a lot of it is my fault. When you grow up a little, I'll tell you everything." "Okay, mommy, but don't cry, okay?" "Okay, my dear, I won't." As soon as her daughter fell asleep, Alice took the laptop into the kitchen, went on social networks, and found out the latest news about the best man in the world. The test showed that John was fine, but Martha was having problems. The doctor wanted to talk to John's wife first. Seeing the fear in her eyes, the doctor reassured her. "Martha, your test results are here, so we'll have to talk to you for a while to get the whole picture. The only thing you have to do is answer my questions truthfully. Do we have a deal?" She could only nod. "Let me take a look at you first, right over here on the screen." When the examination was over, Catherine asked, "Have you had many abortions?" Martha was silent and looked at the doctor with frightened eyes. "I see. How long have you been taking birth control pills?" "Not long, a year or so." "Martha, we had an agreement, really. I can see everything in the test. You're ruining yourself. The least you've been on the pill is 5 or 6 years. First abortions, then the pill. And you want to get pregnant after all that. The pills you've been on for so long have caused atrophy. These drugs have created an artificial monthly cycle in your body and suppressed the normal natural cycle. I will not load you with various terms. I will only say that as a result of long-term use of these drugs, you stop the growth and development of female germ cells. Did your doctor prescribe the pills, or are we our own doctors?" The woman said with her head down. "My friend brought me from abroad. Very good pills. Never once failed me. I think they have. You can't get pregnant. You, as an adult woman, should know that you should choose pills only on the recommendation of a gynecologist, not on your own desire. When did you become sexually active?" "When I was 17. "And when did you have your first abortion?" 19. "Is there anything I can do to help, or have I already messed up?" "I need to recover." And she told me in detail what to do and how to do it. "You're still young. Your husband is healthy and strong. You'll be fine." With the pills, she gave her a day-by-day, hour-by-hour schedule, and she asked her to go to some of the treatments. "I ask you, not as a doctor, but as a woman, don't tell my husband about my early abortions and their number. He doesn't need to know, does he? It won't help me get pregnant, but rather the opposite. Can I count on you?" And she looked at the doctor with the eyes of a beaten dog. "You can," the doctor replied with some squeamishness. At the end of the day, John came in to see her. "What's the matter with my wife?" Trying to be cheerful, asked the man. "Do you need treatment, John?" From what he asked seriously. From prolonged use of birth control pills. You're a doctor yourself and you realize that it doesn't go without consequences. There. You've probably had abortions too, haven't you? John, darling, why do you need to know that? And she reassured him with the patient's words, it won't help her get pregnant. I get it. Thank you, Catherine. Martha took a cab and quickly drove home. She cooked dinner as John liked, set the table nicely, and like a good wife, waited for her husband. He was in no hurry to get home. He decided to walk along the embankment, to breathe the air he was so rarely in nature. Sitting on a bench and exposing his face to the sun, he thought about his wife. So Martha had a number of abortions and had been on birth control for a long time. Mom was right this time. I picked the wrong woman. I'll come home later. Let her go to bed. I don't feel like seeing her tonight. And Martha realized that the throne beneath her was wobbling. The doctor must have told her husband about her turbulent youth, but she didn't want to say goodbye to everything around her. If John didn't want to see his wife, Martha was afraid to look her in the eye and hear that they were getting a divorce, afraid to go back to the rented apartment and live from paycheck to paycheck. And she would never find such a handsome man again. She quickly extinguished the candles, changed her clothes, and went to the bedroom. Martha thought to herself and closed the bedroom door tightly. John entered the apartment well past midnight. He was happy that Martha hadn't waited for him. It was too late for dinner, so after a glass of water and a shower, he went to bed and fell asleep. Martha heard John come in, but she didn't come out. She didn't seem to be breathing at all. She had never been so afraid of breaking up with a man. It wasn't even the man, but what the man had that she wasn't likely to get in a divorce. Her soul grew cold as she thought back to her life 5 years ago. The money at the fitness center was more than modest, and Martha's needs didn't match her financial possibilities. She wanted to rent a better apartment and dress and rest and how to get married without all this. She should know how much effort it takes to please a man. Outwardly, she was attractive. Taut figure, small stature, black as tar hair, always styled and groomed. She knew how to make an impression. Even with her temperament, she had not managed to pull John under her. He immediately defined the boundaries of permissible. When they had just moved in, and she was enthusiastically sorting out the suitcases, she came across a photo album. Looking through with interest, she saw quite a few photos of Alice. Gathering them up, she asked in her hostess voice who it was and what these photos were doing in their house. And what are you so confused? Calmly asked John. This is a good friend of mine. That's it? Just an acquaintance? You don't need to know the details. It was before you, and it doesn't matter now. Then why are they here if they don't matter? Can you answer me? I've already answered everything. Do I have to account for my whole life before you? When you married me, did you think I'd sit around for 30 years waiting for you? That's very presumptuous. No, of course I didn't think that, but keeping a scrapbook of your exes is also rude to your wife. Those pictures are in my album, not the family album. Put them back where they belong and calm down. They'll stay there as long as I want them to. And she realized that she shouldn't talk to him in a raised tone and pry into his private life, even if it was his past. It seemed to her that he didn't value their relationship very much, and she was scared to the point of trembling, afraid of losing it all. Martha looked at her watch. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and she was still awake, but in the morning, she got up before her husband and made breakfast, which was rare. John got up at 7 in the morning as usual and decided to go for a run. He didn't have surgery in the morning and could afford to come to the clinic later. He looked for the Walkman that Alice had once given him, but couldn't find it. Tanya, have you seen my Walkman? I want to go for a run. I threw it away. It was old. I bought you a new one, the latest brand. Here it is. And she handed him her present. He slammed his fist on the table, struggling to hold back the urge to throw something at her. Why are you throwing away my stuff? Who asked you to? What did I do? I threw out old junk. I bought you a nice new Walkman. I want my old one, but take this one back. He didn't feel like running, so he packed up and left for work. It's a good thing he was alone in the car, because what he was saying wasn't meant for anyone's ears. But he let off some steam and arrived at work calm and ready to meet his patients. After work, he went to visit his parents. Finally, the mother said excitedly, I miss you, son. You've forgotten all about your mom. Sit down, I'll feed you. I'd love to eat your specialties. Want some soup? Sure, I'll have everything. Bring it over. How are things with your family? How's the wife? Mom, I want a divorce. Oh yeah, you made a fortune, and you said you choose for life, remember? No, I don't, but I believe my mom, he said, smiling. I hope you're kidding, or are you serious? Oh, Mom, I don't feel like going home. I don't like your Martha very much, but you got married. And not wanting to go home isn't gonna solve your problems, John. You have a family, and if there's a problem, it shouldn't be solved by divorce. It should be solved by sitting down across from each other and talking. If your dad and I didn't do that, maybe you wouldn't even be alive. Come on, eat up and go home. You're a man, and you're supposed to solve problems, not hide from them. You didn't know her at all, and you were right about her. You don't even have to know her, you just look at her and it's obvious. He said goodbye of his parents and went home. Anna was in the first grade and pleased her mother with her success. At the parents' meeting, the teachers praised her for her activity, her desire to help others, for her easygoing character. Alice was pleased when the teacher Juliana talked about her daughter reading better than anyone else in the class, fluently, like an adult. John was proud of his daughter too, if he knew he was a dad. She was drinking tea. Half an hour lunch break was coming to an end. When she was torn from these pleasant thoughts by a call from home, her father was calling. Daughter, Mom's gone. No, I talked to her 2 hours ago. What happened? Alice screamed. I went to the store to get bread, heard her talking to you, came back about 30 minutes later. I looked in the room and Megan was asleep, so I didn't bother her. An hour, 2 hours later, I went to see her, and she wasn't with me, and he cried like a baby. Come, my daughter, I can't do it alone, and he hung up the phone. She left her daughter with Victoria and went to her father's house. Megan had a massive heart attack. She felt sick as soon as she hung up the phone after talking to her daughter. Her eyes went black. She managed to pick up the phone, but could not dial the cherished number 991. When Harry came in from the store, she was already dead. A good death, said the women at the funeral, did not suffer herself and did not torment anyone. For relatives, of course, it is a strong blow, they said, looking at Harry, aged 10 years and bent, as if from a strong blow under the breath, from which it was difficult to breathe. Alice also looked no better, but held on. They remembered what a hostess she was, how delicious she cooked, and of course about her tough character, which would be more suitable for a man. Alice lay in her room and thought about how to live on. She couldn't leave her father alone, so she had to move in with him. She would take Victoria with her. She'll help her around the house and her father won't be so lonely. Daddy, I'm going away for a while. I'll quit my job, and we'll all come to your place. You won't mind Aunt Coralie moving in here? No, I'd love it. That's good, be patient. I'll be back soon. And hugging each other, they parted. There was a dense silence in the house. Only now he realized he was alone. His wrinkled face was frozen in an expression of longing, and the tears rolled down by themselves. How hard it was to be left alone in his old age, without a loved one, with whom he had lived. It was terrible to say how many years. Sure, he would have his daughter, his granddaughter, his sister with him, but it was all wrong. He wouldn't have his Megan with him anymore. Victoria had gotten so used to Anna and Alice over the years that when the latter said she was moving in with her father, she was sad. But when she heard that she was going with them, she was very happy. Alisaka, my apartment is privatized. I bequeathed it to you. Do with it whatever you see fit. If you're short of money, you can rent it to tenants or sell it, or maybe you want to keep it for Anna. You're the only one I've got. She returned to her father a week later. It seemed to her that he hadn't gotten up all that time. Why would I get up? I'm lying in bed waiting to meet Megan. No, Daddy, you can't go there yet. Come on, get up. Go get cleaned up, and we'll have lunch. Like an obedient child, he did as his daughter told him. He felt disgusting. He could stare for hours at the iconostasis he had made from his wife's photographs. Alice did not know what she could do to distract her father. He went into a deep depression, lost the taste for life, ceased to be interested in anything. He was immersed in his grief. It took 6 months for Harry's eyes to brighten, and he began to take an interest in his granddaughter, meeting her from school and helping her do her homework. After school, she would ask him to go for a walk with her. They could go to the park or to the embankment, where they had a great time. Once my grandfather suggested that she read her a bedtime story. Grandpa, I can read perfectly well myself. I know, but I want you to dream fairy tale dreams at night. So listen. Alice wasn't feeling well herself. The stress of losing her mom, the stress of a depressed dad who was literally dragged out by his hair, just like Munchausen. She had to see a doctor. Honey, your blood pressure is elevated. Are you taking anything to lower it? No, I don't feel it. That's not good. You could have a stroke. Have you had a checkup recently? I've never had one. Let's take care of your health. You're so young, but you look tired and sickly. I don't really feel well. I'm tense all the time. After my mom died, I can't recover. My dad's not feeling well. I can't get a job. And I can't sleep. Take some tests, and we'll see what we can do for you. And buy these pills and take them for high blood pressure. And get into the habit of taking your blood pressure every day so you can react in time. Reluctantly, but the woman still had to go through all the specialists, take tests, and come to the doctor for a verdict. The doctor looked at her blood tests, looked at Alice, and asked for a repeat blood test. Do I have something wrong? Alice asked fearfully. Let's not worry for nothing, but we will talk after the second blood test. Alice sat in front of the doctor and waited to see what she would say about the second blood test. She didn't look well. She hadn't slept at all during the night. Yesterday again ended in nothing. She could not get a job anywhere. It was a shame to live on her father and aunt's pension. She was ready to work as a secretary in some firm and was even ready to undergo training, but so far there was no one willing to take her even for such a job. Sweetie, you need to get better first, and then get a job. Managers need healthy workers, and you have it written all over your face that you feel unwell, to put it mildly. Your blood work is bad. Your white blood cell count is elevated. What does that mean, doctor? White blood cells are our everything. It's our immune system. It's our defense against the various enemies that threaten our body. So I'm fine. I have enough white blood cells to protect me. Not exactly. You have to have a certain number of white blood cells, and if they're higher than normal, it's a bad sign. I'll write you a referral to a hematologist, and I suggest you see an oncologist. For your own good, you should show him the mammogram. We need to check everything to get the right treatment. What about the mammogram, doctor? A specialist will tell you. My advice is don't delay. She was so tired she couldn't go to the doctors. As she left the hospital, she caught the eye of a man who looked at her as if she were nothing, with absolutely no interest. She felt how pathetic and scary she must look now, but she was only thinking about getting home as quickly as possible. She didn't care about her own appearance. From the looks on her father's and aunt's faces, they pitied her, thinking that her life could have turned out very differently if she had been a little wiser. As a woman, she had buried herself long ago, and she had a feeling that the doctors would say nothing good to her. The word oncologist alone made her shudder. Victoria had tried several times to strike up a conversation with her about John, that he had a right to be involved in his daughter's upbringing and help her. You're doing it wrong. He's the father. Why don't you call him and tell him about the baby? He'd be thrilled. You've said he's never had kids in his marriage. So Anna's an only child, and you're depriving him of the joy of fatherhood. She didn't have the energy to talk, much less argue. You've lost a lot of weight lately. You don't sleep at night. You walk around like a lunatic. I can hear everything. If you're worried that you can't find a job, don't be. I have some savings. I think Stjepa has some too. We'll live. If you don't want to tell John about your daughter, you'll have to take care of her. There's no hope for me and Harry, and you're dragging your feet. Think, girl, about talking to Anna's father. After she said that, she thought for the first time, what if she were gone? What would happen to the child? The father is like a child himself. Victoria is even older than him. An orphanage? And shuddering at these thoughts, she decided to write a letter to John, but he would receive it only when she was gone. After putting Anechka to bed, she sat down to write the letter. My dear John, it's me, Alice. If you're reading this letter, it means I'm no longer on this earth. Life is such a clever thing. She already knew that our romantic dinner would be our last. It was a beautiful evening and a magical night that got me pregnant. Yes, I did it all wrong, as always. On my mom's advice, I didn't tell you. You have a daughter. If she dares to come to you someday, you'll recognize her at once. She looks just like you. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I never got married, because everyone else was dead before they even opened their mouths. I named my daughter Anna, but not after your mother. It was the name of my aunt's daughter, the one I lived with when I ran away from you. I knew you wouldn't find me at her place because you didn't know she existed. I knew everything about you. Every day I went on social media, I found news about Surgeon John. I'm sorry, my darling. You and I have gone from being two halves to being two lonely people. But I know you got married, and I couldn't even imagine someone else to take your place. You were a beautiful moment in my life. Now it seems like a beautiful dream. But then the morning came, and things didn't go our way. Why did I decide to write you a letter after all these years? I'm sick and can't take care of my daughter. My mom is gone, my dad and aunt are also elderly, and it will be difficult for them to lift my daughter. After mom died, I went back to my parents' apartment again. When I am gone, my aunt will send you this letter. Help Anna in this life, and I will pray for you in the next world. Goodbye, John, and forgive me for everything. If I could take back that beautiful time, I'd do things differently. And when I saw you outside the clinic with Ariana, I would never have run away like I did years ago, but I would have walked over and taken you to the registry office. But what happened is what happened. Anna only knows good things about you. I keep meaning to tell her the reason we broke up, but I can't find the words to explain my stupid actions to her. Goodbye. Alice? She read the letter several times, folded it in half, and put it in an envelope with John's address written on it. She realized that he would never forgive her for this inhuman act toward him. Maybe his daughter wouldn't either when she grew up, but that would be later. And now she had no strength. She needed to rest. The next day she could not go to the hospital, but decided to rest, so that with new strength to take up treatment. Daughter, you're scaring me. Sat down on the edge of her bed, said her father. You don't eat anything. You've lost weight. You have to fight the disease for the sake of your daughter, and you have not even started treatment, and you gave up. The disease is not stupid either. It's afraid of the strong, persistent, and retreats to those who are weaker. Wake up, my daughter. We need to eat to have strength. She got up and could only eat chicken broth. She couldn't eat any more. She herself felt that all her clothes were hanging out. Indeed, the doctor was right. We need sick employees. She looked at herself in the mirror and was horrified. She ran her palms over her face, her hair. She didn't know this girl, but her eyes were still as big and beautiful. They were so sad, they reflected the loneliness she had been living with lately. She avoided looking into the eyes of her father, her aunt, and especially her girl, who was not guilty of anything, but was somehow involved in her game. They, on the contrary, looked at her and waited for her to finally get up and start living, instead of waiting for her to be taken to the cemetery. They saw Alice dying before their eyes. But to everyone's surprise, the next morning she got up, made breakfast, and everyone cheered up when they saw the same Alice. A little worried, she walked into the doctor's office. After looking at her tests, the doctor asked, "What are you complaining about?" "I have constant weakness, no appetite, trouble sleeping, and I have lost a lot of weight. These are just the first signs that the white blood cells are elevated. But provoke this condition can also oncology, endocrine pathologies. How long have you had this condition?" "Yes, as my mom died, I had a terrible stress. I talked to her on the phone, and 2 hours later my dad called that my mom died. It was just shock. It's been over 6 months. You're taking too long to see a doctor. Let me put it this way. I can just prescribe you antibiotics, but we need to figure out what the underlying pathology is. You know, you need to see an oncologist, and if he says you're not his patient, we'll start treatment. Don't delay. The sooner the better." She understood everything, but she was afraid. The oncologist said she had a stage 2 tumor in her left breast. She had to have surgery. He wrote a referral to the oncology clinic and repeated the same words as the previous doctors, so that she did not stall for time. She was put on the waiting list because there were so many patients like her. Only after 3 months, she was able to get on the operating table. Before the operation, the doctor told her that she would have to remove the entire breast because the tumor is a decent size and there is a risk of its spread to nearby lymph nodes and organs. When he saw tears in the patient's eyes, he tried to calm her down. "You understand, these are only recommendations and they do not oblige you to anything. The final decision will be made only by you. But I want to tell you that now you are scared and guided only by emotional and mental reasons. You have time until tomorrow. Think it over and we'll make a decision in the morning." She called her aunt at home, who advised her to listen to the doctor, or she would have to go to him again next year. In the morning, she agreed to the operation. She took it very hard. Her blood pressure was off the charts. Every day her aunt went to her house, bringing her broths, pancakes, fruit. She knew how much it cost. "Aunt Coraline, I'm so ashamed. You buy me pickles on your pension. Don't give me fruit. The food here is good. Don't bring me anything. Give it to Anna." Don't worry, Anna gets the best. 2 weeks later, she came home. The father, meeting his daughter with the words alive, cried like a child. She was happy to see her daughter, and hope was instilled in her that she would still live. 2 months later, she had a repeat blood test and her white blood cells had decreased, but not by much. The hematologist prescribed complex treatment, adding that she should eat well, rest more, try not to be nervous. Doctor, is that any way to live? Rest, do nothing, and don't get nervous. That's how only fairy tales live. So live in a fairy tale for the duration of your treatment. It will do you good and will not harm your health, but on the contrary, it will help you. Victoria was desperately short of money and decided to sell her apartment. Realizing that she would still need money for treatment and there was nowhere to get it, she advertised the sale. 6 months later, the apartment was bought and she could fully feed Alice and buy her medicine. After some time, Alice received disability group 2 and began to receive a pension, a small one, but it gave her the opportunity not to feel dependent. The disease receded for a while. Alice felt better, but for some reason she did not get better, although they ate well. Of course, her appetite was not brutal, but she ate a little bit of everything. 2 years passed. Anna moved to the 4th grade and still pleased everyone with her school achievements. Victoria was worried about Alice. She didn't look well. You should go to the doctor again. Your complexion is a bit earthy. I don't like you. Go, daughter, get yourself checked out. Get another mammogram. It's been 2 years. Dusenka, I'm so sick of these doctors. I don't want to see anyone. I'm tired of them. 2 years, day in and day out in these hospitals. I understand, but give me your word that for Anna's sake you'll go and get checked out. You know, you're my weak spot. Okay, I'll go, but not tomorrow, but I promise. She went 3 months later when she didn't feel well. Mammogram showed metastatic second breast cancer. When she realized that was it, she told her aunt about the letter and asked her to take it to John when she was gone. But the aunt had her own way and dropped it in his mailbox the next day. There had been no change in John's life for 2 years. Martha still couldn't get pregnant, but changed a lot during that time. She decided to go to work and not lead an idle lifestyle, which John was starting to get sick of looking at her. Martha went to work and home in the evening and had time to rotate around the house. Getting started, after 6 years of doing nothing, wasn't easy. But as her wise former roommate in the rental apartment had said, if you want to keep such a husband, turn on your brains if you haven't left them all in the beauty parlors. She chopped the truth, but after her words, everything became clear and understandable as 2 times 2. Do you think you and John have a normal family? You go all day on salon saunas when he at this time is not easy to earn money, standing for 6 hours at the operating table, and you squander this money and complain that he does not go anywhere with you. You have a consumer attitude to your husband. No feelings here are out of the question and cannot be. Leave him and start a new life. Oh, come on, Shanna. I can't. I love him. It's not him you love. It's his money. At least admit it to yourself. Have you ever had a heart-to-heart talk with your husband? Asked how he was doing at work? Have you ever wanted to sit next to him in front of the TV? Put your hand on his shoulder and talk about anything? No, he gets tired. He has dinner and goes to sleep. I understand him and I believe he's tired. I just don't understand why he needs you. A man like that can find a healthy woman if he wants to. You can't even give him a baby. What does he need you for? Are you ready to change your stilettos for more comfortable maternity shoes? Yeah, I've been treated. I've done everything the doctor told me to do, but it's not working. So go to work. Show him that you love him, not for his money, but for himself, so that he feels a home, a family, not these endless trips to salons and boutiques. After that conversation, Martha went back to her old job as an instructor, and John took on a surgeon at the clinic. Now he had less workload and could take care of the clinic's business, which required constant attention. That day he had to fight with the workers who could not deliver another operating room on time. I do not come to you. You are always smoking. When will it end? I'll give you this month's salary only when I see the operating room ready. That's it. This is my last conversation with you. If you don't, I'll kick you out and hire someone else. Slamming the door, he decided to go home early. Martha saw her husband get out of the car and head into the driveway. Dinner was ready. She opened the door in a nice apron, all dressed up, put on a smile, and waited for the elevator door to slam. And John, walking into the entryway, opened the mailbox, and saw a letter with a painfully familiar address on it. He leaned against the wall and immediately opened the envelope. It was Alice's handwriting, Alice. He read the last lines as he came down the stairs. He was already running to the car. His hands on the steering wheel were shaking. He could not cope with the excitement. Alice, no, how can it be? Why didn't she come to me? So stayed with her stupid pride. Only now he realized why she had run away. God, what could she have seen outside the clinic? Silly girl. His heart was pounding and ready to jump out. He drove up to her house. Luckily, the entrance was open. Someone had brought furniture, ran like a boy to the 6th floor, and rang the bell. Anna opened the door. Daddy? In front of him stood a girl exactly like him with Alice's eyes. She was a beauty. Daughter, my darling. The girl was a little frightened by these stormy feelings, although she knew that it was her father, the best man in the world, as her mother said. At that time, Victoria came up. Hello, John. It's good you came at once. You can still see her. So she's alive. She's not dead yet. I didn't listen to her and sent the letter to you as soon as she told me about it. Come in. Thank you very much. He went into the room and saw his fugitive. Her eyes were widened, but he could catch a smile on her sickly, tired face. They looked at each other and both were crying. He crouched on the edge of her bed and took the small, transparent, veined hand in his warm hand. I'm happy for them, Harry said to his sister, and you're so good for not listening to your daughter. Joan smiled affectionately at her and imagined the time when they had dreamed of getting married and having children. She deserved so much more than what she had condemned herself to. Today was a gift to her, a gift she dreamed of since she'd run away from John. He had long ago become a pipe dream for her, like those dreams of movie actors whose photographs she had been fascinated by in her distant youth. He was just as distant and unattainable, even though they had once loved each other. Alice, why did you do all this? Why did you do it? Then he realized it wasn't the time, asked his aunt for a blanket, and scooped Alice up, saying he was taking her to his clinic. Victoria had time to put on his arm a bag with documents and the results of the examination of his niece. Having determined her in a separate room and created all conditions for her to rest, he said to bring another bed to the room. He would be with her, try to make up for the lost 12 years. The next day, he called to his clinic for a consultation with an oncologist, a professor. After examining Alice and familiarizing himself with the tests, he said it was too late, but it is possible to prolong life for 6 months. He gave a list of medicines, warning that they are very expensive, which can improve her condition for a while, described how best to take them. He said that some drugs were still in development. They were promised a great future and could be tried if they could be arranged and bought. John got everything. He made sure that her relatives and daughter were allowed to see her. She did get better. She was even able to go outside for a while to breathe the air. John, in love like a boy the day they met, proposed to her. Do you remember what today is not? John asked the girl. No, quietly replied she. This is the day you and I met. Do you remember? It was raining hard and I gave you a ride home in my car. I can hear your teeth chattering from the cold even now. She nodded and smiled. Alice, darling, marry me. He took out a red box, and only after she said yes did he put a ring on her finger, almost a child's hand. They stood in the park on the hospital grounds and embraced. John, I'm tired and I want to lie down. He had extended her life for a year. During that time they had time to talk, to apologize to each other, to remember the beautiful moments of their lives, and finally to sign their marriage. During that year he had become friends with his daughter, who had become the closest person in the world to him. On the day Alice was gone, there was no sign of trouble. John had one surgery in the morning, after which he came to see Alice. He took her hand and talked at length about how he had been to France and she would definitely go there when Alice was better. She smiled, nodding back at him. She had never felt so good before. He talked, and she closed her eyes and quietly left the world behind. John did not immediately notice that his Alice was no longer with him, but when he looked at her, he cried. He was grateful to fate that for a whole year he was next to the one he had loved all his life. Harry could not bear the loss of his daughter and left almost after her. Anna and grandmother Coraline had always been very close people, and after the loss of their relatives, became even closer. The child felt the warm attitude of the woman and answered her in the same way. They lived together. John helped in any way he could. In the summer, he tried to send them on vacation to the sea. That day, when Martha did not wait for him for dinner, she called him several times, but he obviously didn't care for her. He came home in the morning and was happy to tell her that he had a daughter. She's 12 years old, and her name is Anna. A daughter? You have a daughter? Where did she come from? Is she just another gold digger? I'd have to check if she's a daughter or an imposter. I'd ask you to keep your mouth shut about the money, lady. I know for a fact that I'm not being tricked. It's my baby. What if I have your baby? Or don't you want our child together anymore? I didn't say that. I'd love to have more kids, but we haven't worked out in years. It's payback for your youthful exuberance. Are you reproaching me? You never loved me. I don't know why you married me. You could have done just fine without a wife. I don't know why now. I don't want your daughter in my house. It's an eternal reminder of your turbulent youth. It's either me or your new daughter. Well, first of all, it's not your house, at least it's ours. And secondly, I choose my daughter, my own daughter. So we're splitting the property. What property? The apartment was bought before the wedding. I own it, and you forgot that you haven't worked for 6 years. What here could possibly be yours? I worked at home. Doing your laundry, ironing, washing dishes, cleaning the apartment, that's work too. All right, take whatever you want out of the apartment, that's fine with me. I'll see what I can get an apartment and file for divorce. But I want you to know that I really care about you. I'm sure you do. You blame me for living off you, but you asked me not to work. Tanya, let's not fight. We can still be friends. Will you give me money to pay the rent for a few months until I get a salary at work? Don't worry, of course I'll help. She lay alone in the bedroom again, thinking about how she would live now, and regretted that the fairy tale had ended so quickly. She caught herself thinking not about how she would live without him, but how hard it would be for her without his money. John had divorced Martha, and one day when he came home from work, he saw that half the furniture had been taken out of the apartment. The curtains had been taken down, all the appliances were gone, the TV, the electric fireplace, the bed from the bedroom, probably more, but John didn't care. She couldn't take away what was most important to him, his daughter. Anna was his joy and his pride. After the 6th grade, he transferred her to a school with an English bias, and in addition, she studied French and Chinese. She wanted to become a doctor like her dad. When Victoria passed away, she went to live with her father, and in that apartment, John started renovations. His daughter was going to have the best of everything. Grandma Anna and Grandpa Victor loved Anna. They said she was a Bogdanov breed and were very proud of it. For the first time in her life, the mother had to admit that she was wrong, that she ignored her son's love for Alice and imposed Ariana on him. I must confess, the girl is very well brought up, smart. Well done, your Alice. I admit I was wrong. Her daughter finished school with a silver medal and entered medical school. Already from the first year, she attended her father's operations, gaining experience. Anna adored watching him, his magic hands when he stood at the operating table. He was so handsome, she understood her mom when she was young. When her daughter brought a young man to visit one day, John thought he was going to lose his mind. Daughter, I hate all your boyfriends. I would kill them. Anna's eyebrows crept up. Seeing this, her father immediately began to justify himself. But I'll work on it. Jealousy and possessiveness were tearing him apart. I never thought that I would be so jealous of my daughter to these. He did not want to say bum, but other more decent words he did not find. He shared with his parents. Son, I'll tell you a secret. I understand you perfectly well. Jealous not only fathers of their daughters, but also moms of their sons. Oh, how jealous, especially of these, and they laughed, understanding each other. You have to trust your daughter. She's a very sensible girl. And you don't want her to remain an old maid, do you? Do you know what it's like to be a grandparent? It's even nicer than being a mom or dad, believe me. Children are different, bad or good, but grandchildren are always amazing. Remember that, son.